Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Planning and Community Development Committee meeting for Thursday, October 8th, 2020. Just want to take a moment to acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional territories of the Sechelt and Squamish nations. And as one of our directors is off coast, I'd like to turn it over to her for their territorial acknowledgement.
Thank you, Chair Toth. I am currently in my hometown of Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, here to celebrate Thanksgiving and my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. So I am on the traditional territory of the Blackfoot within the current Treaty 6 area and the Métis homeland. So that's the Niitsitapi, which is the name for the Blackfoot, and I'm very sorry for butchering these names or these pronunciations. The Tsustina, the Michif-Pia, which is Métis, as well as Cree. This area is has always been the traditional territory of many First Nations, as it's due to the nature of the rivers in the area, as well as being so close to the prairies. So I'm very honored to be here today.
Great, thank you for that. Moving on to adoption of the agenda. Is there any items anybody would like to add or remove or what have you from our agenda? Director McMahon.
That was bad. I nearly clicked leave instead of unmute.
Early to be leaving it already.
Yeah, it is. I'd like to add an item of new business, which is industrial cannabis production on agricultural properties.
Okay, so that's under new business. Anything anybody else would like to add? Director Hiltz.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Asset management free training opportunities for new business.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other hands, can I have a motion to adopt the amended agenda, please? Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Great. Thank you very much. Before we get into our delegations, can I have a motion to receive all reports, communications, and minutes, please? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Great, thank you very much. All right, item number 2, Annex A in our agenda, Sunshine Coast Community Solar Association regarding Gibsons and Area Community Center proposed energy and emergency power upgrade. I will turn it over to our delegation.
Good day, everybody. It's an honor to be here with you, and for me, it's particularly propitious. It's my birthday, so my birthday wish is that some of my proposals get used, and it either helps improve programming or perhaps reduce my taxes. So I think probably what I'll do is I'll go straight to sharing my screen. I've got a PowerPoint here. Would that be all right, or do you like seeing my face better?
Nope, go ahead and do your screen share. We'll still see it on the side of the screen.
All right. Okay. Share. So, a word about us. The Sunshine Coast Community Solar Association is a nonprofit. We've been operating since about 2015. One project we've just finished is at the Sechelt Seniors Association. We put a nice little 28-panel unit on their system. But looking around, we see this beautiful, the Gibsons and Area Community Center roof. It's almost the size of a football field, and you know, up in Sechelt, we can see a 100 kilowatt solar array on the Trail Bay Mall. And we're thinking, boy, we could do that on our government buildings as well, and get some long-term savings. So that's basically where we're starting off. Over here. So if we look at what we're aiming to do, we want to reduce the long-term operating cost of the building, improve its energy efficiency, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and increase building resiliency. And I'm not sure which of those objectives are highest priority for the SCRD, but ultimately you want to do all 4 of them. So what I've done is set this out in phases, and you can do 1 phase or many of them. I'm hoping you do all of them actually, but this is basically the concept. If you look at this screen here, this is an aerial view of the building, and this would be about the size of a 10 kilowatt array. And if you take about half of the roof, that's a 100 kilowatt array. And right now, that's the biggest you can put and have in the BC Hydro net metering system. So that's what we're proposing, a 100 kilowatt solar array on the south side of the roof. And here's why you want to do it. A 100 kilowatt array will save you 143,000 kilowatt hours a year on your hydro bill, because that's what it will generate over the course of a year. If you were a householder, the payback would be a no-brainer. Unfortunately, you guys are on, well, actually it's good because it's a lower rate, but you guys are on the large general service rate, which splits it up into an energy portion and a demand portion. Energy is how much you use. So since we're going to produce that much, you will buy that much less from BC Hydro. So directly you can calculate that will be $8,500 a year because of your 6 cents a kilowatt hour. Now you compare that to your home residents, they're paying like 12 to 14 cents, somewhere in that range, depending on their split between basic and tier 2. Now the other part is the demand portion, and that is just the peak amount that you use in a 15-minute period during the month. So that one peak in 15 minutes sets how much you're going to have to pay for the demand part of your bill, and it's charged at $12 per kilowatt. And I haven't seen your bill yet. I would love to see a year's worth of bills, and we could then calculate exactly how much you want to save on that part. But basically, it can be maximized by doing heavy loads during the day. And part of that is automatic. You know, your air conditioning, your lighting will all be maximized when it's most in use. All of your rooms are being used. So you will get somewhere between $2,000 and $6,000 is my guess. And we could calculate directly as soon as we see the bills. You're basically what kind of usage happens. But if we can reduce that peak load, that's where the savings are. So it's probably, you know, the 8,500 is guaranteed, and this part depends on how we do it. So you could get probably maybe $13,000 a year in savings. So this is an investment that pays back. You know, there aren't a lot of things the SCRD does that actually have payback. Okay, to improve the building resiliency, we're suggesting that we go to battery backup as well. The SCRD has got a generator for backup. The proposed 140 kilowatt battery backup is actually bigger than the old generator, and it runs completely maintenance free. You know, lithium batteries that you don't do anything to them for 7 to 10 years. And they would reduce the demand portion a further $2,000 to $4,000 a year, because what they can do is they can kick in and supply energy, say when you're starting up one of those large motors for the ice making machine. Those big compressors take a lot of power on startup. So if you can just shave that so that 15-minute peak doesn't get quite so high, that's when your demand goes down. This is probably a project that you'll do in a year or two. The important thing is that you think about it as sort of, this is where we want to end up, so that we don't have to have a fossil fuel fired generator. So you get rid of the maintenance charge on the, maintaining the generator. You don't have to operate it. You don't have to bring fuel to it. And, you know, if there's a really long-term problem like, a wildfire or earthquake that takes out hydro and possibly natural gas, this will run your emergency systems indefinitely. You power it from the sun, it keeps lights on at night. So prices on batteries are going down really quickly. You probably want to do this in a couple of years, but not this year. This year it costs about $800 per kilowatt, $800 per kilowatt. So, it'd be a big charge. Tesla power walls are already down to 400. Unfortunately, they're not available in BC yet. And they're only going down. So I expect within a couple of years, the price of batteries will be down to $200 per kilowatt. And this will be a really good project. So the important thing is that we design phase 1 so that battery backups can plug in a couple of years. Energy Star LEDs will cut your fluorescent and other lighting costs by about half. So that's a really good one. And plus, BC Hydro has a program that subsidizes it. So tremendous payback on this. This one we should probably consider doing right away, or at least finding out how much BC Hydro is willing to pay and doing the payback on it. Greenhouse gas. The Whistler Aquatic Center has put these vacuum tubes. This is a picture here of my household vacuum tubes. They pick up thermal heat from the sun all year round. They're super well insulated, so they work even in the wintertime. So for our household, we have zero heating costs for hot water, domestic hot water, between April and September. And it cuts the winter fuel cost about in half. So Whistler has a whole array of these. There's three rows of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they're doing a huge. It's very fast payback. I think they figured out it was about 1.5 to 2 year payback on this because they've reduced the gas on their aquatic center. They use a heck of a lot of water, so. A small array here for the rec center, and think about it also for the Seashell Aquatic Center. Probably get a great payback there. Okay, and here's the one that I think most people don't realize and has a huge impact. This is probably the best payback of all for the rec center, and that's just it's heated by gas-fired HVAC units. And if you were to convert the HVAC from gas-fired to heat pumps, it will tremendous savings in energy usage. If you have to have a certain amount of electrical power with your gas-fired HVAC, that's for pumps or fans to move the heat to whatever room needs the heat from wherever you're doing the burning of the gas. And the heat comes from the combustion of, in the rec center's case, it's fossil fuel, it's natural gas. And you're probably getting 80 to 90% efficiency with that heat. When you switch over to heat pump, then you still need that 15% for moving the heat around, but the heat pump is far more efficient. Instead of being 80% efficient on the kilowatt hours that you put in, it's 300% efficient. In other words, you get more heat out of it than you put in. And it reduces your greenhouse gas emissions from whatever we're doing now, 100%, down to 2% by getting rid of that natural gas. So that's a huge impact. And because of that, and I used the natural gas price from yesterday, got it off my natural gas bill. It goes from the 25% that you're spending on the electricity and 75% on the natural gas to 66% all electricity. And a lot of that, if you have installed the 100 kilowatt array, would essentially be free. That would be solar energy. But even if we don't put the 100 kilowatts in, you're going to reduce your operating cost by 34%. So from 100% down to 66. So it's really worth doing. In the future, BC Hydro may allow something called virtual net metering, which would allow community members to pay for panels and get credits. And that would be all fed into the community center. It would be perfect. There's my 10 minutes. I'm almost done. It would be perfect for people who rent or have roofs in the shade if they own their own house, but it's not suitable for their own solar. So New Westminster has done that. And finally, we're hoping that you'll install more chargers, EV chargers, at the center. As more people adopt EVs, we'll need more local charging, and I'm hoping that the SCRD moves into EVs themselves, so having a few chargers for your own vehicles is a good idea as well. So, and also you don't have to give it away free. You can have it be revenue producing. So the next steps, my birthday request is please create a team with the SRD to implement installation of a PV array, that's photovoltaic array, and it will cost about $250,000 or less. I have seen a budget quote of $180,000. You want to make it battery, ready for batteries, so you put a little bit more in there so that you don't have to spend a whole bunch more when you do decide to do batteries. It's very cheap to do the design work ahead of time. And our association would be happy to work directly with the SCRD staff to bring firm budget and payback estimates to the SCRD board. If you give us information on your hydro bills and so on, we can calculate exactly what the paybacks will be. And I think the conversion of gas-fired HVAC to heat pumps has the biggest greenhouse impact, and also has a fast payback. Payback could be 2 or 3 years. And if we get grants for any of this, and there are a lot of grants out there, your payback would even be faster. And as soon as we get that payback, now taxes go down, or you can keep the more or other budget items happening. So it can either go into operations or it can go into savings. So that's, I guess I'll stop now. That was my 10 minutes. Any questions?
Thank you for that. If I can get you to stop, perfect. Stop the screen share. That's awesome. Thank you for that. I see that we've already got a hand up, so I'll turn it straight over to Director Ties.
Thank you, Jerry, and thanks for all that your association does. I think it's great. I think there's some food for thought here, for sure. I'm not sure if we'll be passing a motion today, but I think that it certainly is. There's some good initiatives here. I've got a solar array, and when I installed it, mostly by myself, I was looking at a 20-year return on investment. And that's at residential rates, which are a bit higher than the commercial rates. I'm wondering where you think the return on investment is, and also the lifespan of the battery bank, if it is installed, like how, you say in your documentation it's 40 years the life of the array, but I'm guessing the batteries would have to be replaced several times during that span.
That's correct. I guess the first thing I'll talk about is the payback. So if we pay cash right now, the payback will be 13 years. So as opposed to putting it into a 1.5% bond that I don't know if you can even get that anymore. I think the gas tax money that we have that could go towards this, we have almost no return on. This, if you put it here, then at least you've got, it's equivalent to a 1.8% return on your money. And that's over 40 years, and that's not assuming inflation. Like, we all know where energy costs are going. So 13 years right now, based on the current general large rate, I think they call it. your 6 cents plus demand. So that requires some changes to how you operate. You'll start your large motors during the day, ideally, so that the peaks happen when the array is on.
And that's assuming, of course, there are no grants involved.
If there are grants involved, your payback it dramatically drops. Like you could get 2 or 3 year paybacks if we get some grants.
Before I moved back up to the coast, I spent a period of time working for the Burnaby School Board, and they were going through a huge energy retrofit across all their buildings, and BC Hydro paid for the vast majority of that energy retrofit, including the staff time necessary. So it'd be interesting to see where we qualify or where we can fit in with BC Hydro and their programs. Director McMahon?
I just had a question for staff, perhaps CAO, on whether there are grant opportunities out there right now. We keep hearing about the federal government, backing up the truck and shoveling money off. So, is there money, free money?
Go ahead, Dean.
Thank you for the question. There are potentially some grant programs available that come open from time to time. There is a rural and northern communities second intake closing on October 22nd as part of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. We did some analysis on projects that are in a ready enough state to be a competitive application to that program, and we're going to be bringing forward a proposed application through Infrastructure Services Committee for a submission in October. But there are going to be opportunities sometimes in various programs that could even be tag teamed that we could pursue to try to get some funding to offset the cost of the solar panels. And we'd be happy to pursue those.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon, did you have a follow-up? Are you okay? Okay, Director Hiltz?
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation. Thank you very much. And in your supplied information, you brought forth my understanding that the SERD has this strategic energy management plan, which I didn't know we even had. So thank you for bringing your attention to that. So there is a plan, and so you're kind of plugging into the plan. So thank you for that attention. So my question kind of goes to two pieces. There's the suitability of the roof in terms of the structural integrity, the material. Has that been factored into the project? Like, have you been up on the roof? And then the other one is the efficiency of solar in our gray, dreary winters in terms of an emergency backup plan. Like, is it feasible in our gray, dreary winters to eliminate the need for a fossil fuel burning generator for mission critical applications at the rec center?
Okay, so the last one first. Yes, it is possible. The 100 kilowatt array in the winter will be dropped by a factor of 10. So it'll only produce about 10 kilowatts. So that's why I sized the array to 100 kilowatts, because in order to be able to back up in the wintertime and supply a little bit more than what your current generator does now in the winter, this is the size of array you need. So this will recharge the batteries in the wintertime. And I do have one caveat. If it snows and the arrays are covered, it won't produce power that day. That drops it down to 0. So you'd either have to go out and shovel it or sweep it off as part of keeping it. So at the moment, I wouldn't get rid of your generator. You've got it there. It can be part of the system. Later on, you can just buy bigger batteries so you can go 2 or 3 days instead of just 1.
All right, thank you. Director Pratt. Oh, sorry. Director Hiltz, do you have a follow-up?
There was the first part, the suitability of the roof in terms of was it designed for this and the load rating and all the vents and holes that are up on the roof and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, it is. There's very little additional load when you put on solar panels, and they are generally in. Part of my budget, though, is to have a civil engineer come and put his stamp on it and say, yes, indeed, it is. Because even though I'm an engineer, but I'm a chemical engineer, not a civil engineer. So the drawings imply to me, but I would have somebody actually look at it, and you'd have probably pay $5,000 for that. I put that into the budget.
And certainly the mall roof was never intended to have solar panels on it, and I know that they didn't do any work to reinforce the structure there. So, Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. With my previous experience with the school district and how we went to solar panels on a number of the schools, and I see they've continued that with Gibsons Elementary. There's quite the business case for doing it, and that's what the school district maintenance department was really looking at when they were putting together proposals for upgrades to the heating and the energy sources at the school. Is okay, well, rather than just doing a retrofit for an electrical system, can we put solar into this, and what is the cost of that? And it was found that the cost at the time for doing solar still fit within the project budget, and the long-term benefit that they estimated, for example, at Langdale Elementary, we were looking at, I believe, at a 10 to 13 year payback, and I think it's shrunk down to like 8. And it's just incredible how much energy is created by that system. And I'm fully supportive in looking at this further and looking at how we can use solar to power these other to power our buildings. And I will say, none of our schools were certainly built with the idea of having a solar arrays put on top, but the roofs are perfect for it. And it's even on cloudy days, it's actually kind of incredible to see how much energy is collected within those structures. What I would say is maybe it might be beneficial for us as elected to connect with the school district and see how that's going, because they've been doing it for so many years now. I think Langdale has had solar panels for probably 5 or 6 years now, so they're significantly into this solar project already.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, so just a comment on that. I was in contact with the school district, and apparently, as of last month, they have saved $70,000 on hydro costs with the solar. The Langdale has been in operation since 2017.
Great, Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. And one of the questions I had, and I don't know whether you've calculated it into the figures, roofs sort of last 20, 25 years, if that, the solar arrays tend to have you're indicated a 40-year life expectancy. Do you recommend re-roofing before you do an installation? So, 5 years in, you're not having to re-roof your building? And what is the contingency plan at such time that you would have to be re-roofing?
Okay, that's an easy question. For one thing, once you put the solar array on the roof, it is then protected from the sun. So your roof lasts a lot longer. It probably adds 50% to the life of your roof. It also shades your roof, so your air conditioning costs go down. So that's another benefit we haven't talked about. But for sure, your roof needs to be in good shape before you put it on. So if your roof is near the end of the life, then for sure I would say, well, let's wait until you replace your roof and put it on fresh. But if your roof still has 20 years left on it, I would definitely go ahead. Even though the panels will last 40, they just sit on top, right? They just sit there with a concrete block holding it down. So take that 100 kilowatt array would probably take 2 days to dismantle, move to the corner of your roof, do half the roof, put it back where it needs to be, and then finish your roof. So it would add about, for an electrician, 2 days. a team of guys.
Thank you.
It's not something you have to say, oh, I could never do that. It's not a big deal at all.
Director McMahon?
I'm not going to suggest a motion because as a process consideration, we don't normally make motions arising from delegations. It's not the appropriate procedure. But I am looking forward to seeing a report on a future agenda about our green power opportunities coming up. How's that?
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Seegers?
Thank you. I'll make a motion that we refer this report to staff and have them come back at some future meeting with potential steps forward.
Including any possible grant opportunities that may exist?
Yes.
All right, I see a couple of seconders for that. Does anybody have any comments or questions or debate on the motion? Go ahead, Jerry.
Thank you very much. My wish is being granted because I just want this to move forward, and you're doing that. Thank you very much. And we are totally willing to work with staff. You've got a bunch of volunteers here that have a lot of skills, and I've had solar on my roof since 2014. I have solar thermal. I teach classes at Elder College, so I'm very, very happy to work with staff to help them be as efficient as possible, so they don't have to relearn everything on their own.
All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that's carried. Happy birthday, Jerry. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming today. I've been following the work of the Solar Association since the early days, and I'm really impressed with what you guys can do. And keep up the good work, and we'll be in touch.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to our second delegation, we've got Matt Thompson from Urban Matters. Just before we go to Matt, I understand staff would like to take a moment to sort of introduce everything as a whole. So I'm not sure. I see that Ms. Clark has unmuted herself, so I suppose we'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. Staff and a delegation from Urban Matters Consultants are here today to bring forward the Sunshine Coast Housing Needs Assessment Report. Housing needs assessments are a new requirement of the province under the Local Government Act. The assessment process involves data collection and analysis about local demographics, current housing stock, and housing needs projections for the future. The project was initiated and managed by the town of Gibsons, funded by a grant from the Union of BC Municipalities, and overseen by a collaborative regional steering committee of industry professionals, as well as a smaller working team of planning staff from SCRD, District of Seashelt, and the town of Gibsons. And today we are pleased to introduce Matt Thompson, who's been the lead consultant from Urban Matters, the consulting team responsible for collecting and analyzing the data, as well as preparing the report that's required for Sunshine Coast Housing Needs Assessment. Matt is here today to present a summary of the results, and afterwards take any questions that you may have. I'll pass it over to Matt.
Thanks, Julie. So just going to confirm everybody can see the PowerPoint that I've now shared.
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Okay, thanks for that introduction, Julie. I only have a few minutes, so I do want to emphasize that this is quite high level. The report is detailed. It's over 100 pages, not including appendices, I believe. But I'm hoping that the local government workshop that we held a couple of weeks ago hopefully addressed to some extent some of the questions or nuance of the data that's going to come out. And I'm happy to receive questions after the presentation is done about details. So as Julie has just mentioned, housing needs reports provide a wide range of data, including community demographic data, information on housing and the local economy, as well as typically quite comprehensive community engagement, and are therefore quite useful in helping to inform planning and policy initiatives such as the redevelopment of OCPs, the renewal of zoning bylaws, and any other kind of social or regular planning initiatives that may be undertaken just in terms of getting a handle on what's happening in our community. Housing needs reports are now legally required under provincial law, under the Local Government Act, and must be delivered every 5 years. With the first one, actually it says on there 2021, first ones have to be completed by all local governments in British Columbia by April of 2022. And they are formed as part of the province's 30-point housing plan to support local government initiatives and thinking about what might be done strategically to support new housing. As we're all aware, there is a housing crisis in BC, particularly the southern half. We here in smaller communities are certainly not exempt from that. And so these reports are really intended to provide an evidence base for action from a local government perspective on housing. So how do we use the results? Well, they're intended to help us understand the supply and demand for housing, affordability pressures, the housing needs of specific groups, in our case, notably seniors and families, as well as vulnerable populations, and to understand potential future needs. They also provide, as I've mentioned earlier, a much bigger demographic perspective on what's happening on the coast, and in other communities where they're being conducted. So they really emphasize kind of the who and the what of housing and population, but not necessarily the how. I will state that as part of this project, we are also going to be conducting some best practice review or research and a policy review with specific recommendations coming out for the SCRD, the District of Sechelt, and the town of Gibsons. So while this report does not yet cover the how, that will be a component of this project that we'll be bringing forward to staff in the future, probably later this year or early 2021. So the project itself, and I have to apologize, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm a little fuzzier than I would normally be. So I apologize if I'm coughing or a little bit sneezy during this presentation. The report views housing on the Sunshine Coast through this this graphic, and I'm sure everybody is familiar with what we would call the housing continuum. So kind of spectrum of housing that moves from emergency shelters all the way to market ownership. Excuse me, a couple of years ago, I think in 2017, the city of Kelowna sort of re-envisioned the housing continuum as what they call the wheelhouse. And that's this graphic here, and it's really intended to show that housing is not a continuum that we move through linearly, but is instead something that we may kind of move between different sort of pies in the wheelhouse over the course of our lives, from rental to ownership to maybe short-term supportive housing if we experience a temporary disability, to long-term supportive housing as we may age, to emergency shelters if we experience a crisis in our life. So all of these forms of housing are part of a healthy and diverse housing ecosystem, and all need to be considered. While kind of market housing does comprise the bulk of the housing on the Sunshine Coast and in other communities, nevertheless we have to consider these other components of housing for our community, particularly as affordability becomes more of a pressure. So a little bit about the project. We launched the project in January of this year with the completion of the collection of housing data, and housing data was collected and analyzed through the spring, with community consultation initially proposed to be launched a bit earlier, but due to COVID-19, we had to sort of regroup and manage to do all of our consultation online through late spring and early summer. And then now we're moving into the reporting phase of this project. To wrap that up, it has gone in front of the town of Gibsons Planning and Development Committee. It's currently in front of you, and next week it will go in front of the Committee of the Whole for the District of Sechelt. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be following this up with a bit of a policy report as a next phase. So at a high level, I'm wanting to present some findings, just emphasizing that this is quite high level. The report goes into detail. The report contains housing at a glance kind of infographics or communications tools for all of the electoral areas, the town of Gibsons and the District of Sechelt. So what I'm presenting right now is very much a kind of bird's eye view snapshot of the issues that we uncovered during the research and report writing. I will also emphasize that I think much of this will confirm what we already know anecdotally about what's happening on the coast. And so there weren't really any big surprises, but it does show that that what we're seeing in terms of anecdotal trends and issues are really supported by the data quite strongly. So overall, the regional population grew by about 8% between census periods in 2006 and 2016. However, most of the growth was concentrated in Gibsons and Seashelt in terms of population. Although Roberts Creek, Elphinstone, and Half Moon Bay did also see increases. All of our communities across the coast have a median age of 50 years or older, indicating that at least half of our population is over that age threshold, with the oldest populations in the region in Pender Harbour, Egmont, and the youngest in Roberts Creek and Elphinstone. This trend is expected to continue. It's not actually unusual to see this trend in many smaller communities, but it is definitely an older population is definitely more concentrated on the Sunshine Coast, and we anticipate continuing to see moderate and steady population growth and a bit of an aging population through the coast and our electoral areas, particularly over the next 5 years. Median households have grown in electoral areas, with the notable exception of Roberts Creek, which has a number of interesting sort of slight discrepancies from overall regional trends. Elphinstone saw the highest median household income at a little over $70,000 in 2016, quite comparable to the BC kind of overall median of just shy of $70,000, with Pender Harbour and Egmont having the lowest household or median household income of about $54,000. While median household incomes were increasing across the region, it's worth noting that that there's a big difference between owner and renter households. In some cases, owner households were earning more than double what renter households were in Pender Harbour and Egmont, Half Moon Bay, and Elphinstone. This is not unusual for communities across British Columbia. Often, if a household is able to purchase, they will purchase because of the security of tenure. But it does flag for us a major issue around the potential for vulnerability to affordability issues if you are a renter household. Across the electoral areas, there's quite a lot of similarity in terms of the housing stock, in terms of the form. That is, it's primarily single family or single detached homes. 50% or more of the housing in electoral areas was built for larger families, i.e. it has 3 or more bedrooms. But, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a bit of an older population which tends towards 1 and 2 person households. And so there's a risk that those households may be overhoused, or as they age, may be unable to maintain their property. This is certainly something that's come up in some of our coastal, our electoral areas on the Sunshine Coast. And while I think there are very good reasons for older households to have a larger home, such as being able to welcome their families in if they're visiting from out of the community, or being able to host friends, it does pose a risk for older households. That is, especially kind of households where the couple or the individual may be 80 years old or older and susceptible to health issues, or unable to kind of keep pace with the maintenance required of a large home. In terms of, because this data is largely reflective of what we learned through the census in 2016, we also looked at building permits, which were issued between 2015 and 2019, and across the electoral areas, again, the large majority were building permits that were issued for single-family dwellings. This is very much in line with the kind of character of the rural areas of the Sunshine Coast, so not necessarily a surprise. But just worth noting that update or that more recent data is in the report as well. So there are a number of slides here which kind of outline the potential issues around affordability for ownership. Overall, the report finds that affordability is a major challenge for any household that's buying into the market now and even earning a median household income. The average sales price of a single-family dwelling has gone up considerably over the last 10 to 15 years, and especially in the last 6 or 7 years. And of course, with the dominance of single detached homes, that means that, typically they are less affordable than townhouses or condominiums. And so for the electoral areas, they remain largely the only option, and yet also the least affordable option. So really what the information is telling us, and I'm just going to kind of skim through, recognizing the time limitations, skim through the next few slides to kind of indicate that what we're seeing, which is that, households right across the Sunshine Coast are experiencing, or would be experiencing, a lot of difficulty in getting into the market, even if they were earning, over $100,000. Let alone, the vulnerability or the issue around affordability of ownership for lone parent families or non-census families who are just unable altogether to be able to afford to purchase at current prices. This doesn't mean that lone parents and individuals aren't in the market. They may have gotten into the market prior to the big spike that we've seen over the last 10 years. Clarification, non-census families refers to individuals either living alone or with roommates. Typically, what that means for kind of ownership is individuals purchasing on their own. The large majority of non-census families are individuals on their own, although in some cases they may be living with an unrelated roommate. And so this is Pender Harbor, Egmont. But we see the same kind of trends right across the coast for Half Moon Bay, for Roberts Creek, for Elphinstone, and for West Howe Sound. So it really doesn't matter what community we're looking at. The incomes may fluctuate, the cost of a single detached home may fluctuate, but overall the affordability remains an issue. When we look at rental housing, we see similar, because of the discrepancy between household incomes for owners versus renters. Even though renting is generally cheaper, we do see that rental housing remains unaffordable for most median earning households. Again, across the electoral areas. Worth noting that this is largely true of the District of Sechelt and Gibsons as well. We're just not going into detail in this presentation because it is the regional focus. Roberts Creek is relatively speaking more affordable when looking at the cost of rental, but that doesn't mean by any means that it is overall affordable. Just that it's slightly more affordable than what we're seeing in some other parts of the region. And again, single income renters like lone parent families and individuals living alone, that is in non-census families, are likely to face the greatest affordability challenges. One of the indicators that we have through the census is renter households who are experiencing poor housing need. And this means that they are either in housing that's not suitable to them. That means it doesn't meet the bedroom requirements for their household size, or it's not adequate. That is, it's not properly maintained, or it's not affordable. So they're paying 30% or more of their income towards housing. So if you're in one of those circumstances as a renter, and your income is such that you're unable to afford anything else in your market, then Statistics Canada and CMHC would classify you as in poor housing need. So despite the fact that the large majority of households are owner households, we have more renter households in the electoral areas in poor housing need compared to owners. And there's also typically more that local government can do to support the development of affordable rental than addressing the affordability of ownership. So again, kind of moving quickly through these slides, recognizing the time limitations. This is the affordability gap analysis for anyone currently entering the market. Based on, I will note that there's quite limited data on our rental market through CMHC and Statistics Canada. So we actually did a secondary rental market snapshot as part of our research, which looked at units being rented out on the private markets, including full homes being rented, secondary suites, and where relevant, things like condominiums and townhomes, although that stock was quite limited, in order to get a better sense of kind of what's going on from electoral area to electoral area and across the coast, just because the data wasn't generally available for any jurisdiction other than the District of Sechelt through CMHC. So yeah, Pender Harbor, Egmont, big big affordability gaps, some similar in Half Moon Bay, Roberts Creek, with that one sort of, high median earning couples with children are probably within the ability to kind of afford what they need in terms of rental housing. But then for Elphinstone and West Howe Sound, similar affordability gaps. So a note about other groups that kind of came to light in terms of housing vulnerability through the research. In 2018, there were 57 individuals counted as experiencing homelessness in between Seashelt and Gibsons, so kind of in the ribbon from the town of Gibsons up to Seashelt. We know from research, I have a background in doing homeless counts, and while they're a useful metric, particularly in urban areas, we also know that they're very limited in terms of what they are able to count regarding homelessness. And we also know that rural homelessness has a very different face than urban homelessness, with a lot more hidden homelessness being experienced in small communities in rural areas. That is, people who may be living in inadequate trailers or unfinished cabins or unfinished secondary suites or even boats, or camping out in the bush, and who are less likely to be captured through a point-in-time count given the limitations of the methodology. So we know that there's a lot more housing vulnerability than is counted through the point-in-time count, but nevertheless, it gives us a good indication of kind of visible homelessness and folks who are accessing shelters. In 2019, there were 560 households that, according to BC Housing, received some form of housing support, whether it be a unit or a rental subsidy or support due to experiencing homelessness or being at risk of homelessness. What we gathered from the engagement was that generally vulnerable groups across the coast, who include youth, individuals with addictions and or mental health issues, individuals with physical health issues, the adult children of older adults with developmental disabilities who may still be living with their parents, lower income families, the working poor and seniors are all groups that may be vulnerable to the housing crisis that we're currently seeing on the coast. And they're increasingly unable to access housing that meets their various needs, both due to affordability as well as other issues such as accessibility or the need for wraparound services. So just to kind of summarize some of the key issues that we want to take away from this regionally, affordability is a significant issue regionally for the vulnerable groups that I just mentioned, but is increasingly impacting the workforce and employers' ability to be able to maintain a stable workforce. Engagement does suggest that there's a high demand for rental housing, which is not currently met by our limited supply of purpose-built rental. We know that there are limited housing options for people with physical activity limitations or mental health challenges. New supportive housing has come online within the last couple of years in the district of Seashelt, and we anticipate new housing coming online in the town of Gibsons later this year, towards the end of the year, which should mitigate that issue somewhat, but nevertheless, that does remain an ongoing challenge. We know that we have an aging population, and we need to plan for opportunities both to downsize for older adults and move into accessible housing forms, whether there's a ground-oriented or multifamily with access to elevators. Although we have a very dominant form of single-family housing, which typically is designed to serve families, due to the cost of housing, lower income families, community engagement suggests that lower income families really aren't benefiting from the fact that we have a lot of single family housing, simply because it's not affordable. And finally, homelessness and hidden homelessness is becoming more of a challenge every year that goes by as the cost of housing increases. So I will stop there and stop my share. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation, Matt. Let me find my participants list here. Directors, do you have any questions for Matt? Director McMahon.
Sure. It was an interesting report. Yes, not too many surprises. Looking forward to the policy recommendations, because knowing that we have a problem is one thing. Knowing what to do about it is a whole different question, especially in the rural areas. One of the questions that I had was, I have 5 mobile home and or RV parks in my area, which my personal guesstimate is that at least 15% of the households in my area are either in a manufactured home in a park or in an RV in a park. And that's not including the manufactured homes on private land. So what constitutes a movable dwelling and what constitutes a manufactured home, and do you keep track of those kind of
both good questions. So the terms are used somewhat interchangeably. One of them, manufactured home, I believe, is the term used by Statistics Canada, and movable dwelling is the term used by BC Assessment. And so you'll see both terms in the report, and we try to refer to them according to the source of the data that we had. But typically they refer to a mobile home, not an RV, which would not be captured or under national housing standards even considered long-term or permanent housing. So mobile homes represent one of the big data deficits that we have with regards to housing in rural areas, because permanent or long-term mobile home or manufactured home parks are captured under the census and would be counted by census takers. But any dwelling that is more of a camp form of RV or maybe hidden, so for example, a manufactured home on somebody's back 40 that isn't necessarily counted by a census taker would not be captured, particularly if it's not reported by the homeowner. And this is where the issue, I referenced it earlier, the issue of kind of rural hidden homelessness really becomes pressing, is because, you know, we're not always convinced that the census has an accurate reflection of what's going on in people's larger rural lots, due to I think, either a willing or a desire to keep property taxes down, or the buildings aren't to code, or they simply aren't captured or reported by the individual when they fill out their census form for other reasons. So it's an issue. I would definitely flag it as an issue, and thank you for raising it. But it is one of the deficits with the data that we have.
Director McMahon, did you have a follow-up? Nope, you're good. Okay. Director Hiltz?
Thank you. Yeah, great. Lots of data, lots and lots of data. So the policy piece, the policy report is part of the whole housing assessment, and will come at a future date. And just what is that, the connection between this and the policy piece and the timeline?
Yeah, so they're forming part of the same project. It's a separate phase and will be a separate report. This report currently conforms to provincial legal requirements for housing needs assessments. The intention with the policy report is to continue to work on it through the remaining months of this year. We're working with our staff working group as well as our steering committee. We'll have one more round of engagement around the policy report, probably in early November. A steering committee meeting where we're going to bring some of the draft recommendations to the steering committee later in November. The hope is to try to bring it back to the board and councils prior to the end of calendar year, but it's going to depend on board schedules. But, you know, we're looking at a fairly tight turnaround. I think, I'm fortunate in this project to be located in the region which I'm studying. So, I think that gives us a little bit of a head start in terms of some of the best practices that we'd look at and policy options. I'd say late 2020, early 2021 is when this board would see that next round.
Great. Director McMahon, see your hand back up?
Yep, I thought I'd let somebody else get a turn. The size of homes. I have lived in a mobile home that was a 3-bedroom home that was 900 square feet. And we also have 3-bedroom homes in my community that are 3,000 square feet. So do we collect any data on the size of homes?
Director McMahon, you're very good at picking up on the data deficits, which is great, but it's an issue that we have with the census. Again, they don't collect square footage, and we're fairly reliant on, there's a custom census request that the province does to support these reports as they've been rolled out. And so we're somewhat limited by what comes in that package in terms of how we analyze it. And the only indication that we have of size is bedroom size, as you pointed out. We don't talk about square footage, and that's an issue. I mean, I think, again, sort of anecdotally, we know that many of the homes on the coast are quite large. And again, it points to a potential for overhousing for small households that are in those homes. And at the same time, yeah, just because you have a 3-bedroom doesn't necessarily mean it's actually adequate for your household size. So it's a proxy that we look at as bedrooms to kind of number of tenants or residents, but it's by no means a perfect measure.
Especially now that we've got more people working from home too, people may be converting bedrooms into offices and things of that nature, so craft studios, what have you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. Question, and this again goes back to some of the data. One of the points in one of your slides said owner households were earning more than double what renter households are. And yet we also indicate that our population, our median age is 50 years old. So we have a lot of retired people here. So, and a lot of those are on pension. So how does that, I don't understand how the two of them relate. If we have a lot of people on pension, fixed incomes, but there's still, and a lot of those are homeowners, and they're still earning more than double what renter households are?
Yeah, and that was, I believe that full double was specific to the Pender Harbor Egmont area, okay. but nevertheless, we see significant discrepancies between owner and renter households where it's typically, yeah, I mean, in communities that we've looked at, and I forget what it is across all the jurisdictions on the coast, but it's not unusual for it to be as high as double, but even, if renters earn about 60% of what owners earn, yeah, you're absolutely right that the risk of an aging population as well does mean that that there's a potential for a kind of decline in income as households age, and so that's something we want to be aware of. I mean, typically the way that an income graph looks is younger individuals living alone are amongst the lowest earners. They're very early career, maybe just out of school, maybe still in school. Then you have couples with children. That is, younger couple families earn the most because they span everywhere from early career to late career when their children are still at home. And then couples without children span both kind of late career folks and those folks who are retired. So that that group consists of both people that are on kind of a more of a fixed income, as well as those people that may be at the peak of their earning capacity. And so it's those couples with children and couples without children that tend to be more of the ownership households, across all communities, really, that realistically two household incomes or a 2-household income is required to purchase something in this day and age. But you're right to point out that as our households age and as there's an overall aging demographic on the coast, the risk for declining owner income is more significant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Thank you. And 2 questions. One is, this is a housing needs report, which somewhat probably differs from the housing wants report. And I'm wondering how you reconcile those two. I mean, you said there's a lot of couples living, especially elderly couples living in homes that are too large for them. But I can think of hundreds of arguments as to why they want to stay in the house that they've either lived in for 30 years and don't want to leave, or just want the privacy and all that, which differs much from the housing needs. So I don't know if you can comment on that. And the other one is how do seasonal homes or vacation homes, how are they reflected in the report?
Yeah, I'll start with the second question and then move back to the first. We do capture seasonal homes through there's an indicator within the census that shows permanently occupied dwellings, and then using kind of the gap between total dwellings and permanently occupied dwellings, we can infer the number of seasonal dwellings that are on the coast. So that is a figure that's I believe in the report, although it may be buried in the reams and reams of data that are there. So that's typically, the indication of holiday homes or homes that are only partly occupied, whether that's snowbirds, although I'd anticipate this year we'd be seeing less snowbirds and more permanent residents, as well as folks that have kind of cottages or summer homes on the Sunshine Coast. In terms of addressing your question around needs and wants, yeah, I mean there are, I think there's probably a laundry list of things that we could come up with on the Sunshine Coast for wants around housing. It's not the role of local government to encourage older individuals to leave their homes, and it's the role of local government to provide options should they choose to. And so, to that end, I think having more of a diversity of housing in our town centers like Sechelt and Gibsons provides that ability to downsize yet stay on the coast. And at the same time, the report itself, in terms of what it says about needs, really highlights, I'd say, the kind of the lower income, those folks who are on the lower income end of the continuum on the Sunshine Coast, and the fact that the situation, particularly in terms of rental, has gone from bad to worse over the last 6 to 7 years, since about 2014. It was already an issue prior to that, but since about 2014, and this is not unique to our community, it's a trend that we're seeing across the province. It's gotten to be quite an issue as property prices have gone up, particularly in large metro regions like Vancouver and Victoria and Kelowna. The areas around them have seen significant property prices increase as well. And that is coupled with then a decline in kind of vacancy rates and purpose-built rental, and a general lack of new purpose-built rental overall in roughly the last 20 or 30 years, means that if we're to focus on a priority and pressing issue as local government and decision makers, it is about thinking through the options for those folks that are most impacted by those changes. And yes, to some extent, that does mean more affordable ownership opportunities as well as rental. And there are new federal and provincial government programs that are looking at those opportunities. But for many of those folks, it is about creating more rental opportunities and ensuring that at least some of those are affordable as well. So if we're going to take anything away from that, not only is that a need, but I think for all of us, it should be a want in terms of ensuring that long-term residents of the Sunshine Coast can stay on the Sunshine Coast, and that income is not a barrier to being able to reside here, which increasingly I think we're hearing from employers it is.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Matt, to you and the team. And I know there's a lot of people who have been involved in putting all this together. It's it's an incredible amount of information, and as we've said amongst the elected, there's nothing really that's hit us over the head other than it's all right in front of us now. So it's good. I will comment. Director McMahon, you had mentioned about the square footage of places. A lot of that information we should be able to access, I'm wondering, through BC Assessment, because it's on everybody's assessment notices, the square footage of dwellings that are on property. So I'm wondering if we can, if that is something that we want to look at further down the road, we can certainly look at that too. It's not the immediate concern, but I will tell you anecdotally, as in my professional life, there is quite the disparate range of housing options, or housing sizes, I should say, on the coast. And one thing that, when we're talking about the precariously housed or the marginal, we do know of anecdotally of people living on boats. And do we have any of that? Is any of that captured in the census data? Being that we are a very water-borne community, we do have a number of boats. We know anecdotally there's a number of people that do live on boats. I can think of the story of the resident who moved off of his boat and that is now sitting up in the district of Sechelt works yard to move into a supportive housing place. But I'm just wondering if we have any data on that as well, because we know they're there. It's a matter of capturing that too, and some people are very happily ensconced in their in their sailboat or their yacht and do live there extensively. But we know there are some that are very precarious in their situation too.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's been a confounding component of the point in time count methodology overall. 2017, I was part of the Metro Vancouver team that actually piloted an effort to work with liveaboards to count them. But as you mentioned, there's a huge diversity of liveaboard folks on boats. Some of whom are there by choice with strong incomes, working and are choosing to live on their boats and may have access to things like electricity and the ability to kind of get their heads cleaned out at the docks that they're at or the marinas that they're at. And then there are those who are in quite precarious situations. Unfortunately, even though we piloted a kind of a marine-based method, it was quite limited in terms of what it was able to achieve in counting people, because our very definition of homelessness doesn't really account for the diversity of folks that may be living aboard their boats. In that, we don't take choice and kind of the services that you may or may not have around you as a liveaboard into account. If we were to use kind of the national definition of homelessness, folks who are living aboard their boat are generally considered homeless, even if they are, sort of well-appointed, large sailboats with access to a marina and living off, their investments. They would technically be considered homeless if they didn't have a permanent address. So it's a big limitation in the methodology, and it's for rural coastal communities, it's a huge issue. It's not just the Sunshine Coast, Nanaimo, and the Comox Valley and other parts of Vancouver Island see this issue as well. So I think the best we can do is kind of continue to be aware of it and flag it, and promote the services that are doing outreach to those most vulnerable populations in kind of trying to get out to those folks that we do know are vulnerable in our coastal communities.
Great, thanks, Matt.
All right, Director McMahon.
Yeah, just one final question. Do we have any idea, even a guess, how much of our housing stock is accessible or could easily be made accessible, like, ranchers that are at ground level?
Yeah, I mean, again, if we were to take a guess at that, I think Director Pratt's suggestion of going through the assessment data and potentially, with a fine-tooth comb through some of the building permit data from the last 10 to 20 years. I'm not sure what level of detail is available through building permits, but those might be the options for sort of saying something is or is close to accessible. But again, not a metric that's captured through the census or any of the other data sources that we're looking at.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I got 3 questions, actually. Area A and West Howe Sound are unique in our regional district in that we both have approximately 40% seasonal homes. I call them part-time residents, actually, but they're not listed as a primary house for the person that owns them. Does the fact that we have such a high percentage change your baseline and future projections? Because the reason I'm mentioning this is that they're all taxpayers. So maybe some policy change could be made that would encourage them to rent them to somebody and then just lose part of it themselves. So that was my first question. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so the projections incorporate semi-permanent or part-time residents insofar as historically they've been a part of our community. And what that means is that, I think one of the trends that we see, particularly at Pender Harbor, Egmont, and at West Howe Sound, is that that households may purchase a home, and I think, to some extent this happens in Half Moon Bay as well, while living in a place like Metro Vancouver, using it as a weekend residence, and then as they retire or move towards retirement, may move up there and live there more full time. So that's been kind of a long-term trend, and so if it's captured historically, it would be part of the trends that are incorporated into the projections. But in terms of, if we were to anticipate, for example, a wave of folks close to retirement moving to Pender Harbor, Egmont due to for example, COVID, that's a kind of fluctuation that wouldn't be incorporated into the projections. So to I think your second point there around kind of policy for encouraging renters, I mean, there may be levers that we can look at. It's hard for local government to do much more than play around the edges of that kind of incentive based on sort of what I've seen in my experience. You can provide some small incentives to homes that are being rented out, but fundamentally, kind of one of the tenets of ownership is that they have the right, more or less, to do with their property as they will, as long as it doesn't, it doesn't break any bylaws. And so it's more of an incentive than it is anything else. And typically it's quite a gentle incentive. Things like, we've seen in other communities potentially relaxing utilities for a little bit if you can show proof of rental. But again, that's a pretty small incentive.
And I have one more question, if I may, Chair.
Go ahead.
In your report, you talk about sustainability concerns such as water and energy efficiency. I was wondering how energy efficiency played into sustainability.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's two issues. So energy efficiency in terms of new builds, if we can reduce energy expenditures, then I think you're reducing overall kind of load on the system, which has its own implications. I'm not a climate scientist or an engineer, so I won't speculate too much on what those are. But the flip side of that is that it costs more to make an energy efficient home. That can be a marginal cost, but it does impact the cost of construction. And I'll note that one of the things, based on my limited experience with non-market housing developments, is that there's this tension between senior government funding programs that want to emphasize and push kind of an energy efficient model in housing, and at the same time the cost of those things. And so, while energy efficiency is one of the priorities of the National Housing Strategy, and it's something that BC Housing pushes through their step code, through the step code, nonetheless, it does cause an increase in the cost of building, which then has an implication for kind of the affordability of rent. So it's this balancing act that we're currently seeing in terms of senior government funding, but it's the same thing in the private market. That where we look for savings in energy, we may at least in the short term see an increase in the cost of housing. Hopefully, the ideal, I think, as the previous presenter showed, is that over time the increased energy efficiency causes reduced operating costs. But it may be hard to sell to somebody who's building their own home that kind of long-term effect versus the short-term impact.
Good.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes, I missed that aspect of it.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. This is probably a staff question, but I thought I'd ask while Matt is still with us. The last recommendation in our Annex B says that the recommendations that we're going to be considering be forwarded to the October 8th regular board meeting in order to meet the grant deadline. What is the grant deadline?
I can answer that. The grant deadline is the end of the year, December 2020, for the town of Gibsons. It's received an extent. Oh no, sorry, it's November. I apologize. So it's the end of November for the grant deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Clark.
Matt, I'm going to just jump in here. I believe UBCM's deadline of receipt, the resolution of receipt is for October the 16th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just a follow-up then. So if we're not having it presented at the District of Sechelt next week, do all of the local governments have to have the recommendation in by then in order to meet this grant deadline? Or was one enough, I guess, is what I'm looking
No,
for.
I think it will be coming forward to the District of Sechelt on the 14th for presentation at the Committee of the Whole.
the question, I suppose, is because that's only committee of the whole, those recommendations still have to go to council to be approved, which wouldn't be until the following week.
Okay, we'll have to just keep an eye on that and make sure that we meet the deadlines we need to meet. Thanks.
Director Kroll?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank you, Matt. It's it's an amazing amount of work has gone into this project, and we received it in the town of Gibsons just recently, and which is why I sort of kept quiet here. But it's really interesting to see the various perspectives coming out of the report from the rural directors. And I think it's a great example of the collaborative effort that's gone on between the municipalities and the regional district. So, as Director McMahon pointed out, it's not perfect, but I think this is probably one of the best guidelines we've had to work with for a long time, and hopefully it'll help give us better direction, particularly in the municipalities where rental housing is such an acute problem. So thank you and your team for great effort.
And thank you for all of the presentations you're going to have to do to make sure that everybody gets the information. So, okay, seeing Director McMahon?
Yeah, I did appreciate the individual reports on each rural area. I thought those were very helpful. If there is any opportunity to capture data on the mobile and manufactured sector in future, that would be helpful. That's it's not just about housing adequacy. There's questions about retrofits. There's questions about aging housing stock of that sort. And then there are, of course, all the people that we know anecdotally who are now living permanently in RVs, which is subject for concern. So hopefully we can learn more about that in future.
All right. Seeing no more hands up, thank you, Matt, for your presentation. We do have Annex B, which is pertinent to this. And I don't know if Ms. Clark would like to speak to any of this, or...
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, technical difficulty there. Staff don't have anything further to add beyond I wish to extend our thanks to Matt Thompson, Sarah Ravlich, Emily Gray, and the rest of their team at Urban Matters for their work to prepare this report for our region.
All right, thank you very much. Director Lee, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to find the right page. On Annex B at the start, there's a series of recommendations, and I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendations as presented.
All right, and I see several seconders. Anybody wanting to speak to those recommendations? No. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Great, that's carried. Thank you very much. It's 10:54. Shall we take a brief break and reconvene at 11 o'clock? Is that sufficient? All right, thank you. All right, welcome back. It is 11:01, and we're going to continue on with Annex C, Development Variance Permit DVP 00067, 8703 South Saginaw Creek Road. And we'll turn it over to Mr. Sayao.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this variance is to waive the requirement for off-street parking spaces to have vehicular access to a highway. Based on the existence of the access road and the conditional upon a new 10-year extending the access road to the subject property, this variant is considered reasonable and would provide the benefit of not having to seek off-site parking elsewhere that may cause potential land use conflicts. The application has been referred to the Egmont-Pender Harbor APC and is supported by the APC. So staff recommend approval of this development variance permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions regarding the report? Director Hiltz.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Page 325, it's about Modi's indication of the ministers to have this a public road. Does Modi send a written document? Is this verbal? Like, how secure is this statement?
Thank you, Chair. This statement, I believe, was made in the previous applications when the applicant was seeking to rezone the other property for off-site parking. Yeah, it was not particularly documented. So, yeah. Okay,
thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Director Hiltz?
Yeah, so I should have asked staff earlier, but is there a method of confirming this? Is that a procedure that SURD would write a letter to Modi saying that this is our understanding, tuck it away in the file, so in 10 years you pull it out and you're going, this is what you said? Or is it you wait for 10 years till it happens?
GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. I hesitate to speculate, and so I think if this is an item on which further information is needed, staff would appreciate the opportunity to do some research on what is documented from the time that the OCP was drafted. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. This is a considerable shift from the initial proposal, and I'm wondering if the Pender Harbor APC needs to be reconsulted.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The Pender Harbor APC has been referred to recently, and they had made a recommendation of supporting the variance.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. I notice we have other speakers on the list. I was going to happily move the recommendations, but because I certainly support what's been put here, and it's a good solution. It is quite a different change from the one before, and I'd just like to note one of the residents who does own property in this area, Mr. Johnson, on page 331, where he references the water access properties, and I'm just curious. I'm wondering how much more we may be seeing, like how many more of these water access properties that now do have road access will we, is there a sense that we're going to have a lot more? I know there's the community was primarily settled for water access, and this requirement, it's nothing that needs to be, it's oh my gosh, I've gone into the general wondering manner here. So I'm sorry for taking us on a little bit of a tangent, but it is something I'm intrigued about, because it's something that may be creating an issue with other properties in the future, not just within Area A, but I'm wondering about other places as well. I'm going to leave it there because I rambled.
Thank you, Director Pratt. Director Seegers.
Thank you. On the map on page 327, it indicates that part of the access is over a private easement. So I understand, that currently they have access over that, but I can tell you we have a situation in Seashell where we had that exact situation, and now it's under new ownership, and the properties no longer have access across that easement. Even though the easement's there, the owner's saying, no, sorry, you don't have access. You're back to water access only. So how do we ensure that this piece, over time, will still give these people access to this property?
Mr. Sale?
Thank you, Chair. That's a good question. Other than making a condition that the applicant obtain the new 10-year from the province, there were indeed other private easements existing as part of the access road. I would suggest that in order to secure those easements, we could look at perhaps other conditions to make this easement be more permanent and secure. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. That easement actually has been secured by covenants against the property it goes through. So it'll never be blocked, that private easement. That was presented, well, I forget, but anyways, they'd looked after that part. As for the road itself, there's 70 properties at the end of that road. The chances of Modi closing that road is pretty slim with those 70 properties. And most of those 70 properties haven't already secured parking off-site for water access. They were done before the subdivision. So we're talking about 4 lots here, which is a minor part of the problem if it ever happens, but I can't see Modi ever doing it. I'm quite convinced that they will not do that. The other part of it is that the residents are very much in favor of having this development permit passed. They don't believe that there should be a disruption to remote properties when there is a road. Whether we put some sort of a covenant on the property that says if the road's ever cut off, they'll go obtain parking off-site. Maybe we could do that. That might be something we might want to consider, but I don't think that's necessary. I think this is a good solution. The APC was very aware of it and was asking why we didn't go with this solution at the very beginning, because the subdivision just before it, known as the Saunders subdivision, was treated the exact same way as we're proposing to treat this Thompson subdivision by an earlier board. So the precedent has been set as well. So the residents are overwhelmingly in favor of this. They're overwhelmingly opposed to having parking in the residential area. And there is a potential for us to work with the owner of a property on the north side of Saginaw to create potential for any future water access only parking to be made available. They're eager to do that. The suggestion was that by previous boards that we the SCRD should be working with that, with those proponents to get that parking for off-site water access only in Saginaw, so that it is available to everybody. But it requires a zoning change as well on that end of the lake. But because it's right on the water and there's nobody around, that one there is not as contentious, getting parking added to the zoning as it is in the middle of a residential subdivision called Saginaw Ridge. So I think I'm in favor of issuing that permit. I wouldn't mind just simply making a motion. Well, let's hear from Donna first. Thank you.
Director McMahon.
Thank you. I'm in favor of this solution. It seems to fix the immediate problem. However, I would be interested in some future time in a conversation about road access, particular to water access properties. Maybe this is a lunch and learn opportunity. How many water access properties do we have? I cannot see the SCRD trying to negotiate road access for properties that are water access. I mean, hello, they're water access. That's the conditions under which you purchase the property. So, but the question of road access to properties is interesting, and it's going to get a lot more interesting with climate change, because there are roads that are very vulnerable and properties that may no longer have road access. And I realize that's sort of Modi's problem, but we're in the middle of it. Thank you.
Director Pratt.
I'd like to move the staff recommendations on page 324, please.
All right. Is there a seconder for those? Seconded. This is rural voting, A, B, D, E, and F. Any other questions, comments? No? Call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex D, application for land inclusion into the ALR for Morgan Property, ALC application 60840. Turn this over to Yuli again.
Thank you, Chairs. The purpose of this ALR inclusion application is to fulfill one of the conditions for ALC's approval of the excluding another portion of the subject property from the ALR. So the applicant originally proposed to exchange 1.16 hectares of land. However, ALC only approves 0.3 hectare of land for this purpose. So in a separate ALC application, the applicant had also originally applied for subdivision to sever the excluded portion from the parent parcel, but later canceled the application. So this inclusion of the non-ARR portion into the ARR would help to enhance the overall land use efficiency of the farm and reduce conflict with non-farm users. This proposal is appropriate for the location and intended use. Staff recommend that SCRD authorize the application to proceed to the ALC and indicating support for this application subject to verification of the agricultural suitability of the land proposed for the inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is also rural planning, A, B, D, E, and F. Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, thanks for staff for the report. Yeah, I'm supportive of the recommendations presented, but I just want to give a little bit of background before. This is the theme is silos, MOTI, ALC, and SCRD. So this the LC has also put conditions on the applicant for a survey within 3 years, so to get a firm understanding of what the boundaries are. And something I found a bit surprising was in the ALC decision, the applicant actually had made a request for a 5-lot subdivision to go from 4 hectare parcels and a remaining 23 hectare parcels. So this was not part of, it was a bit of a surprise to see that, that the applicant, that was part of their intention. It didn't make it to the board table or the ALC discussion. So this siloing is of one application process in affecting the others is something to watch for. But I'm happy to move the recommendations unless there's other discussion.
I will accept your moving of the recommendations. Is there a seconder for those? Seconded. Okay. We do have a little speakers list, so Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question is just to, it wasn't 100% clear in the report whether this inclusion is for the 0.3 hectares that the ALC recommended or whether it's the 1.1 that the applicant requested. So I'm assuming it's just the 0.3 hectares.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's 0.3 hectares.
All right. Director Ties, was that enough or did you have a follow-up? All right. Director Lee.
My question is very similar to Director T's, but I'm curious, the 1.16 hectare that was to be included originally is now labeled as a 0.3 hectare. And so therefore the exclusion is now 0.3 hectares. Can anyone explain the difference between those two to me? How did 1.16 all of a sudden drop to 0.3?
Do we have background information on that?
Yeah, I can answer that question. The 1.16 hectare was the original proposal by the applicant, who considered that triangular piece of land within the parcel is 1.16 hectare. However, through the mapping exercise with ALC, it was determined that that piece of land is actually 0.3 hectares. So that therefore, ALC has approved the exclusion application only for 0.3 hectare rather than 1.16 hectare. And that's why the inclusion part is also 0.3 hectares.
Thank you. Director Hills.
Sure, thanks, Chair. I can add a little bit of context to that in terms of the process where this first became before planning committee and the board's recommendation was it was not in a position to provide a recommendation mostly based on that undetermined factor, is it 0.3 or 0.116, and it was really only up to the ALC to kind of determine what is true. So, and the ALC as part of their condition is to ensure that truthfulness or factual based is to get a survey. So, and the applicant must do that within 3 years of the ALC rendering that decision. So that's why at the time I moved at that, I didn't feel comfortable making a decision because of the size of the property was unknown. So more is known now, and the ALC has put conditions on to really find out what that size of property is through a survey. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more hands, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex E, monthly provincial referral review. Looks like this is Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Staff have developed a new report format to provide review of multiple referrals from Flynn Ward in one monthly report. This updated report approach to responding to referrals is needed both to prevent backlog and to address the increasing numbers and complexity of provincial referrals, as well as to align SERD's technical review with our service areas and our decision-making authority. Provincial referrals are applications to the province to make private use of public or sometimes called Crown land. The province is the decision maker in this case. As a process note, responding to provincial referrals is a choice made by individual agencies and is not a legislative requirement. SCRD's practice in recent years has been to respond to referrals by resolution of the board. This is also a choice made by the SCRD and not a requirement of the province. Staff see the opportunity to even further refine how SCRD responds to provincial referrals, but this monthly referral review is a first step. If directors have feedback on the approach, it can be provided through the chair to CAO, and we certainly welcome opportunities to better serve committee and the community. This report includes a review of 4 referrals, private mortgages, 1 lease extension for a commercial mortgage, and 1 referral for a mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to compliment you on this new format, grouping them all together. It's much easier to read, to digest, to see what we're looking at. I just will point out for the committee, on page 346, items numbered 5 through 8 are supposed to be numbered 1 through 4. So that was just a small typo that was brought to attention yesterday. Director Lee.
Yes, thank you. We used this process at our last APC meeting, and it was very streamlined and it was very good. And by clicking on the additional links, you got all the information that you actually needed, and it didn't have to be repeated. It seems like a fairly large step forward in the process, and I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the report, the style, I think is much more digestible. Yeah, I'm supportive of the process changes. My question is in terms of SCRD internal procedures. I didn't really think that these things were optional in the past. So does the SCRD actually have a policy of that they will respond, or is that something that will be coming forth in the future?
Who'd like to take that question on? Ms. Clark.
SCRD currently has no policy about responding. It's been a practice over the years.
And then I guess the follow-up to that, Director Hiltz, is that something we want to entrench in policy somewhere down the road?
From what I sound, based on the report, there will be more coming from staff as we move along, so that's what I'm waiting for.
Okay. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I noticed that the Area A APC raised some questions about mining operations in remote areas. And I guess I take it that these kind of operations run with very little oversight from anybody, certainly not us, probably not the province. Do we ever have any follow-up on these applications to find out whether the conditions were met?
Go ahead. Oh,
well,
you guys can arm wrestle it to tell me who answers that question. I don't know.
Well, I will attempt to answer, Chair, and then the senior planner may correct me. I believe that the result of the referral is generally made available on the provincial portal, and then in terms of adherence to regulations, as the first point of contact, SCRD, as closest to the ground, SCRD is often informed by members of the community when there are concerns about an operation. And so if we're put in that position and we relay information to the province for enforcement or follow-up, we sometimes become aware of the outcome of those things. But the director is right. It's not really an SCRD responsibility, and we do rely on the regulating level of government to oversee these things.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
As this is one of the few items on the agenda that I can vote on, I'm going to move recommendations on page 342.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for those? Seconded. All right. Any further discussion on the motion, on the recommendations? All those in favor? Great, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex F, Home Site Creek Secret Cove Recreation Site Partnership Agreement and Stewardship Memorandum of Understanding. Turn it over to somebody. It's titled for Kevin Clarkson, but...
Well, thank you, Chair. I can speak to this one. On this one, the committee will recall recent direction provided to staff to proceed with a partnership agreement related to Homesite Creek Secret Cove Recreation Site. And in bringing forward that report and receiving board direction, staff neglected to include explicit authority to sign off on the agreements. So while direction was given to make the agreements happen, the board's consideration and just authorizing entering into those is an important step in documenting staff's authority to act. So this is just approval required in order to take action on a prior direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
I will happily move the recommendations on page 348.
Is there a seconder for those? Seconded. Thank you very much. Director McMahon, I see your hand up.
Just wondering whether we should forward this to board today to get it done. Is there any urgency or timeliness involved?
Not from staff's point of view, Chair. We continue to work with the province and the partnership group on this, and once the paperwork is done, it'll just assist us in continuing that forward momentum. But thank you for the question and the suggestion.
Thank you. I do notice that we do have a couple of other items later in our agenda that are to go to board this afternoon, so it means we have to get through our agenda today. Seeing no other hands up, I'm going to call the question. This is voting A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex G, My Sea to Sky Pilot Community Invitation, Building Capacity for a Community Energy and Emissions Inventory and Evidence-Based Climate Action Planning. Turn that over to Ralph Shea.
Thank you, Chair. This report outlines an opportunity for collaboration on the community community energy and emissions inventory, and this is part of the 2021 work plan. So My Sea to Sky is working with a variety of partners, as outlined in the report, and they're looking for letters of support from local governments. Staff would be happy to take any questions at this time.
All right, thank you. Director McMahon.
I just wanted to say this looks like a good initiative. Really happy to see it, and I am happy to move the recommendations on page 350.
All right, do I have a seconder? I do have a seconder. Okay, Director Hiltz, I see your hand up.
Yeah, a question. So is this where the SCRD is essentially taking the lead role in the, similar to the housing needs that the SCRD is through regional sustainability? Is that how it's working, or is each one going on its own? Just how is it packaged? How is it going to be packaged up?
Go ahead, GM Hall.
Thank you for the question. I think it's a little early to say, since My Sea to Sky haven't finished the scope of the project or confirmed funding, but the partnership opportunity is one that staff are actively pursuing, and certainly a regional approach would be efficient. Thank you.
And it certainly has a good opportunity to sort of share the load with everybody as well. So, Director Seegers.
Thank you. On page, by 351, under option 1, it says, if the regional district opts to participate, data will by default be generated for the member municipalities and Shishot Nation and or SIGD. What types of information would be generated? Would input be required from the municipalities and the Shishot Nation? How would that actually work? Or again, is it too early to determine any of this at this point?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's a little bit too early to dive into the specifics, but at a high level, the intent of the initiative from My Sea to Sky is to look at both a community energy and emissions inventory with a more traditional scope, as well as something that's more of a consumption based. So some collaboration and information from the local governments, as well as a variety of other local partners will be needed down the road.
Thank you. I see no further hands up, so I'm going to call the question. This is voting all. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Director Seegers, your hand is up.
Sorry, did we actually put this on the floor? Or did we just, we did? Okay. Okay, I'm losing it this morning. I'm with Lori.
All right, moving on to Annex H, invitation to tender, contract award, Langdale Well and Pump Station improvements. Who would like to speak to this?
Good morning, Committee Chair Toff and committee members. I'm pleased to present to you for your review and approval the contract award for the Langdale Well and Pump Station Improvements Project. Work generally under this project encompasses the replacement of the originally installed pump and motor assembly that has been in continued uninterrupted service since 1971 with a new energy efficient pump and motor, along with mobilization of mechanical and electrical control system upgrades. This project was tendered and the district received one compliant tender from Coast Mountain Excavators. Staff recommends the contract be awarded to said contractor in the amount of $281,545 plus GST. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I see a speakers list forming already. Director McMahon.
Oh, I'm going to lob a difficult one out here, but I had a constituent write into me and ask, do we consider seismic risk when we're locating our wells? The ferry terminal is famously on a fault line. And so the question was, why would we have a well on a fault line? I know that's a little outside the scope of this report, but I just wanted to inquire since we're digging a lot more new wells now.
Yes, thank you for McMahon for that question. So yes, seismic risk as part of a geological assessment would be considered as part of any, building foundation assessment design and so forth. So answer to your questions, yes, it would be.
But that's just as a follow-up to that. That's in looking at the structure. Is it given consideration when we do drill new wells?
Typically, no, not at the time. We're certainly the main focus of the test drilling well is certainly for the, located in the underground aquifer and the well yield and quality. That's the primary purpose of the test wells.
All right, thank you. Director Lee.
Yes, I think I asked this question before, but I forgot the answer. I'm trying to figure out how the 2018 budget was $100,000 and the 2020 budget is $318,000. I can't remember what happened between 2018 and 2020.
Right. So there was a subsequent additional request for money that was carried forward essentially. So the $100,000 was carried forward, and then there was another $175,000 put into the 2020 budget for a total allocated budget of $275,000.
Thank you. Director Hiltz. Oh, sorry, Director Lee.
But that doesn't explain how budget grew so large so quick.
So yeah, okay, thank you for that. So yes, good question. So it was the complexity of the project. We are replacing the entire electrical and motor control center with upgraded computerized and telemetry motor control, as well as the mechanical piping is also being replaced in its entirety. And quite honestly, those items are not cheap anytime you get into electrical. It's electrical design and so on and so forth. And they do add substantial costs to the original project. And I don't believe the original project anticipated those type of upgrades. We're also changing the motor controls from a fixed speed to a variable speed drive and that type of thing. And those are expensive ticket items that adds to the cost.
I see GM Rosenboom has unmuted himself. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's more in addition to what my manager has already indicated. The original scope was just to replace the motor, but just to replace the pump itself. But while we were working on that, we identified several other items on this older facility that needed to be upgraded. That without doing so, we would not be able to upgrade the actual pump itself. So it was more a spin-off of we needed to upgrade the pump, and in order to do that, other items were needed to be upgraded as well.
Less an improvement project and more of an overhaul project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Correct.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can offer this pump a long-term service award for being in service for over nearly 50 years. That's incredible. You know, these systems are three-phase motors are amazing. So this pump owes us nothing, and we need to get this stuff in the ground to provide a reliant, redundant system. There is no redundancy in this pump system. This is the sole pump to this neighborhood. So awesome job on the pump, and thank you, staff, for the job. It's been an ongoing project. So the community is really happy to see this moving forward. So when the time comes, I'm more than happy to move the recommendations.
All right, I see a seconder for that, so we'll move and second those right now. Director Ties?
Yeah, just a question whether, I see there's a drawdown test being done. I'm just wondering if there's increased capacity, whether the Langdale system could be merged with a Chapman system as an augmented source.
I can take that one. One of the wells that we're in the process of planning to drill as part of our test well program this year is actually close next to this well, because we identified that this aquifer might have some excess capacity. What that would require is a combination. If that would be successful, that would most likely lead to a combination emerging from the Langdale system with the Chapman system, just like what's happening currently with Granthams.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I was just curious about what emergency backup power we have on these pumps. How does that work? If the power goes out, the pump presumably doesn't go out.
Thank you very much for the question. So what will happen in an emergency? Every water system like Langdale has a reservoir. The reservoir has a capacity to provide water to the community for, depending on the size of the community, in the reservoir for 12 to 24 hours. During the time we have enough, in the time we can bring our portable generators from our Mason workyard to, for example, Langdale, to power the pump.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no further hands, I'm going to call the question. This is regional water, so A, B, D, E, F, and C Sheld. Sorry, Town of Gibsons. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to Annex I, request for proposal, contract award for metal container hauling and recycling services. I see Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Chair Toth. The SCRD collects metal at the Pender Harbor Transfer Station and Seashell Landfill, and the metal is transported into the Lower Mainland for recycling. Container transportation and recycling are provided via contracted services. The SCRD's current contract for these services is set to expire on October 31st of this year. As such, a request for proposals was issued. And the purpose of this report is to award a contract for metal container transportation and recycling services. Thanks, and staff are happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much. Just before I go to my speakers list that's forming, on page 358, it mentions that the 2020 budget is $52,000. Was that the previous contract value? I may have missed it in the report. My apologies if I did. Go ahead.
Thanks for the question. No, it is not the value of the contract. I will add that, however, the total value expended each year is directly related to the amount of metal that we receive. So that budget value is lower and does not reflect the tonnages that we've been receiving.
Okay, thank you. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, the proposal is $140 per ton to reflect the increase in costs. I see that garbage is $150 a ton. I really don't see the point in sending somebody through a scale twice for a mere $10 a ton difference. Can't we just round it up to 150, considering we're also short on money for landfill closure and such things? I think it would speed up processes and improve efficiency.
Okay, so something for us to consider, but would there be any problem with us doing that, unifying the tipping fees? Suppose there's a question for the staff. Whoever would like to take that on, go ahead.
Thanks for the question. What staff can do is incorporate Director Ties' suggestion of the $153 a ton for metal, and that can be incorporated into the tipping fee review report that's coming forward to a committee next month. So the plan in that report is directors will have the opportunity to approve or consider tipping fee values for each of the materials that are identified as shortfalls in that report. So it could be addressed at that time.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Yes, thank you. I actually have two questions. I'll just start with asking for clarification on that $52K in 2019, which was the cost of doing this. That was the budget amount, so it must have been the anticipated amount that it was going to cost in 2020. That figure is doubled. Could you explain why that figure has doubled?
Thanks for the question. So following up from the previous question, so it's twofold. So one is that in order to increase the budget each year, staff would have had to have brought forward a budget proposal for this year to increase the budget to match the amounts. So we did expend more than the budgeted amount last year. And then second to that, the increase in the budget amount is reflective of the increased contract costs. However, the contract costs for the transportation services is strictly for transportation. So in the proposal that is being presented to award, any revenue received from the sale of the metal would be directed to the SCRD. So the costs for transportation are 100% for transportation, where previously the costs for transportation were offset by any revenue that would have been received by the contractor who was doing the hauling.
So this basically takes the variability of metal pricing and bin content out of the contract.
Puts it on the SCRD, but that is the suggestion that the metal prices dropped so much that we have to subsidize the hauling more. Is that what we're talking about here? I'm trying to understand the change from $70 a ton to $140 a ton. That's a huge increase, and what the heck variables have changed to make it that big is really what my question is.
Thank you, Director Lee. That's where I was going to go with that, but thank you for that. It is a huge difference. You know, we're talking about doubling a tipping fee. Usually when people bring metal to the dump, I imagine they're not bringing an entire truckload of metal to the dump, because we do have locations that take metal in for free on the Sunshine Coast currently. It's probably mixed load, I'm thinking, and perhaps staff can clarify that.
Thanks for the question. Yes, much of the metal received is part of mixed loads. So we do receive some entire container full of metal, which would likely be from, say, a renovation where a homeowner has rented a bin, or from a sort of a new construction site. But most transactions are from a mixed load.
And as a follow-up, to go from $70 to $140 a ton, that's taking the revenue of the metal out of the offset, I guess. So this is full cost recovery. The revenue from scrap metal going in is just going to be going into, I assume, landfill reserves? GM Rosenboom?
Thank you for the question. What is, in terms of the increase, I'm going to go back. It's really through the budget that was in the amount that was in the budget last several years were not full cost recovery. So we were not collecting enough. So actually we're losing money on our metal contract and on metal diversion at the time. So this is really to correct that and to reflect any increases that we have with the current contract, with the new contract. In terms of the revenue, yes, the revenue will go back into the tipping fee fund we have.
Okay.
And what the actual amount is, that will be determined over time. But there will be hopefully money at the end of the rainbow.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I was curious about the structure of the contract. I've seen contracts that are 3 years or 5 years with potential extensions, but having a 1-year contract with 4 1-year extensions is fairly unusual, and I was wondering why that is.
Go ahead.
Thanks for the question. The structure was set up in the RFP partially to address volatility in the recycling market, so that the SCRD is in a position to continue to provide the services, so that whoever is the contractor providing the services can put together a proposal that would address the market conditions for the sale or the revenue or the loss of metal.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, interesting topic. So the metal that we're dealing with is essentially the lowest value metal that you can get money for. That seems to be what I never really thought, that we deal with the leftovers after everyone has high graded all the metals of value, it goes to the landfill. So this is the lowest value metal. And in terms of the per ton rate, to encourage people to source separate, there is still a penalty if loads are not source separated. So that would still, if a combined load comes in, there is a method to encourage people to source separate. So that those things are still in place then.
Yes.
All right. And sorry, Director Hiltz, I mentioned combined load, but I think like you drive up there with a pickup truckload of stuff, and like Andreas, Director Ties mentioned, you'd end up scaling multiple times as you drop off in each section of the landfill. Director Lee.
Yes, I had a follow-up question on this mixed. I believe everything that's dropped off is essentially mixed. And it just goes out that way. There's no sorting. So I'm not aware that anything changed between last year and this year on the contract. If there was something that's changed, I'd be interested to hear what that might be.
Go ahead.
Thanks for the question. To clarify and follow up on discussion, when staff are saying a mixed load, it's referring to when a resident shows up with a pickup truck or the back of their vehicle, and they may have 3 bags of garbage. They may have a handful of metal or some metal siding. They may have a piece of drywall. So meaning a mixed load, referencing multiple materials in one load.
Okay, so that really doesn't affect the contract or the cost of handling the metal then? It's not something that we should be including. Thank you. I'm still struggling with 70 to 140, and I'm still struggling with the fact that we would then use the fact we can sell the metal to offset the general garbage. Are we going to disincentivize the metal to where it's not being done anymore? That's my concern.
GM Rosenboom, I see you've unmuted.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I would like to point out on 359, page 359 of the package, it's included that there are 3 sub-options to option 1 included. Option 1A is increase it from 70 to 150 tonnage fee, and that states that revenue will be used to offset the actual contract cost. If we were not going to do that, it would need to go to 280. So we made an assumption about the revenue we were anticipating from the amount based on the tonnages last several years, and the current pricing. Based on that, we anticipated 140 should be full cost recovery. So to come back to the question, why moving metal is expensive. Hauling metal is expensive. And this was the lowest bidder, or this was we had several bids, and this was the most favorable in its package for us. So it is, there are, as indicated in the report, there is a private company on the coast where residents can drop it off for free. So it is really, people are still bringing it to the landfill, and we need to do some kind of cost recovery to it, and that's what's creating the proposed tipping fee. And as I indicated, the previous tipping fees just did not cover the cost already for several years.
I know that I've both taken scrap metal down to Gibsons for free and also just paid to get rid of it at the dump because I didn't want to deal with going all the way down to Gibsons. I suppose it's a tangential question. We know that there's a recycler in Gibsons that takes scrap metal. Is there anybody up Pender Harbor Way that takes scrap metal in? Go ahead.
Thanks for the question. Not that staff are aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Not that I'm aware of either. I've tried to find someone that would take it, but no, there was when the metal was higher. There was Kurt was taking it for free and hauling it down, but the price of metal has dropped to where he can't make it pay anymore, so he's quit doing that.
It's like hauling metal's expensive or something. Director Ties.
Yeah, so ultimately, what we're charging for is the convenience of dropping it off locally rather than driving it all the way to Gibsons. And I personally don't have a huge issue with that, considering that, at least from my experience, that you sort of accumulate a little bit of metal every now and then you, at some point you just make a run down and get rid of it. It happens maybe once every 1 or 2 years for me. So, and you could be doing it on your way to the city, even if you're living up in Pender Harbor. But yeah, so I think if we're charging for convenience, then I don't have any qualms with that.
All right, Director Hiltz.
I'm supportive of the recommendation, just to let you know. I just wanted to give a shout out for Bypass Auto. Is the service that they provide, they also have to deal with people depositing things that shouldn't be put there. They're dealing with contamination issues. It is a service that they're providing. So I would just like to say thanks to Bypass for providing that.
Director Lee.
This is my last question, I promise. I was just wondering if it would be cheaper for us just simply to grab her and haul her to Gibsons and dump it in his yard rather than take her down to Vancouver and try and get money for it. Is it cost effective for us to pay to haul it all the way to Vancouver for the money we get for it?
I mean, it was mentioned in here that there was revenue of approximately $99,000 that we wouldn't otherwise see. So I guess the question is, hauling it that extra distance, Is that less than $99,000?
Yes, what prompted my question is I was asking some questions in preparation for this, and I understand that a private operator quits hauling around $800 a truckload because he can't make any money. So.
I can try to answer that question. None of the applicants, none of the bidders proposed that alternative, and as staff we didn't explore that as well with auto bypass.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
I'll move the recommendations on page 357.
I see a seconder. One thing I will raise is that Director Ties mentioned the idea of doing it as $150 a ton to match household waste so that it doesn't have to be rescaled. And I know that there is a review coming, but do we want to leave them different for now, or do we want to try and harmonize it now? And then GM Rosenboom, you're muted.
What is required in order to actually implement increased tipping fees is change to the bylaw. We deliberately delayed, did not include it in the recommendations to allow for all bylaw changes to be implemented at the same time. So there is an opportunity next month to increase it, to change this tipping fee again, and then we can actually implement all new tipping fees as one time soon afterwards.
Great. So this is sort of a placeholder. We'll deal with it next month when we look at the whole bylaw. All right. I see no other speakers to the motion. All those in favor? All right. That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex J, request for quotation, contract award for gypsum container and transportation services. Ms. Cooper again.
Thank you, Chair Toff. The SCRD collects gypsum not containing asbestos at the Pender Harbour Transfer Station and Seashell Landfill, and the gypsum is transported into the Vancouver area for recycling. Container, transportation, and recycling services are provided via contracted services. The SCRD's current contract for container and transportation is set to expire on October 31st of this year. So as such, a request for quotations was issued. And the purpose of this report is to award a contract for gypsum container and transportation services. And thanks, and staff are happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. I don't see a speakers list yet, so I'm going to ask my question. We're looking at annual amounts of approximately $80,000 for container hauling for gypsum. Looking at our previous report where we're looking at $200,000 for 1 year's hauling, is it just the sheer volume of material that's being received that's resulting in that difference of a contract for each year?
Essentially, yes. So the containers are moved in 40-yard containers, so there's different pricing structure based on container loads and also the amount of material that can fit into each container. So depending on the metal, for example, you can fit a lot less metal in a bin than you can gypsum.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee.
Yes, this contract, is it tied to volume, or is it just a flat rate for a year?
Go ahead.
Thanks for the question. So there's a total annual value that is estimated based on anticipated tonnage that we'll receive for the gypsum.
And if there's less tonnage, there's less money paid out?
That is correct. So many of the contracts for the Seashell Landfill and the Pender Harbour Transfer Station are structured that way. We have an anticipated tonnage or volume or number of container loads that we would get each year. And that's what's structured into the request for proposals or the request for quotations, and then an associated budget is allocated based on those volumes and tonnages. If we get less, then less is expended. If we receive more, then more is expended. But it's offset by the revenue that we would receive.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
I'll move the recommendations on page 361.
All right, and I've got a seconder for those, and I have no speakers list. Oh, Director Lee? Okay.
I was busy seconding it.
Oh, you were too slow. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex K, Planning and Community Development Department 2020 Q3 report. Turn it over to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. At the end of every quarter, staff report on activities and key statistics for the preceding 3 months, and staff would be pleased to answer any questions based on the report from the third quarter of 2020. Thanks.
And I see I already have a question. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I saw on page 377 reference to a non-potable water source exploration project at Marianne West Park. Right now there's a drill rig there drilling for potable water. So is this rolled together or is that separate?
Who'd like to take that on? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I will say it is together, and there's close coordination between utilities and parks. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Director McMahon, you still have your hand up? Okay. Are there any other questions? All right, there we go. Director Ties.
First of all, thank you for that report. I think it's a good, timely one. Good. I did unmute myself. Good. I like the idea of getting an online booking engine for the recreation facilities. That's great. I also I was looking at the admissions to the Seashell Aquatic Center, and I think that'd be worth noting for our later discussion regarding the letter coming from the people wanting the Gibsons pool to be reopened. And I think we need to do a better job updating the public that we are sort of doing a reopening of some services that were initially still closed, like the leisure pool and the lazy river and all those things, because I think usage of these facilities is not where it should be, because people are thinking that it's really only at the level that it was when we first opened, rather than where it is now. Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, you mentioned the attendance statistics, but I just wanted to highlight them. They're on page 380 and 381, and it is certainly quite the drop from where we were last year. So, Director Seegers?
Thank you. In reference to the letter that's going to be coming, I had a question about the Seashell Aquatic Center. I believe when we initially opened the pool, we did not have the showers and change rooms available for the public. Are they now available for use?
Who'd like to take that?
Thank you for the question, Chair. And I know we have Manager of Recreation Services, Graham Dawn, in the meeting with us. Yes, they are available, and I do believe, and Graham can correct me, I believe that they have been consistently available since we reopened. Thank you.
Okay, so that's probably important to get out as well, because I know one of the concerns the people of Gibsons had was that they believed they weren't open, and so if they were going to use the swimming pool, they had to actually leave in wet bathing suits and take a bus back to Gibsons. So we need to make sure we get the communication out. Thanks.
Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Quick question on page 377. That's about the community hall bookings. It's impressive to see people using the community halls. I'm wondering, from staff's perspective, is the size of the
The YouTube stream says that waiting for the meeting to start, so it's totally broken.
Apparently, someone accidentally created.
So if anybody would like to take a quick run to the bathroom or anything like that, I think it's going to take a couple minutes.
Hello, Chair. Sorry about that. It appears that someone inadvertently created an unrelated meeting using the same account that is used for the board meetings. So I'm going to figure out who that was and have a talk with them. But the meeting should be back up and running. I mean, it's up to you if you want to take a short break, but I think everyone is coming back in now. And the YouTube stream should continue with just a brief interruption that we all had.
Okay. I think to get rid of the echo that's happening, which is now gone. Thank you. We've got Sophie in as a panelist, so perhaps we should demote Sophie. Sorry, Sophie.
Yes, sorry about that.
I don't have any co-hosting abilities, or I'd kick her out, but we'll just wait another minute.
So we're waiting for Director McMahon.
Yeah.
Mark, you were just mid-sentence. You were going at it.
You overloaded Zoom, Mark.
While we're waiting, Ian, do we need to bring Alan Van Velzen into the meeting, or?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Just try and see where she is. Okay. Well, while Donna gets reconnected, shall we continue where we left off? I had a speakers list. I no longer have a speakers list. I know Director Hiltz was speaking, just starting. So if you want to try that again, Director Hiltz.
I will try not to crash Zoom this time, right? So yeah, the uptake of the bookings is the issue. Are people, potential booking people, having difficulty meeting the requirements to use the facilities in terms of size and the various paperwork, or are people generally adapting well?
Who'd like to take that question? How are people adapting to the new procedures for booking halls?
Well, thank you for the question, Chair. Staff are doing our best to work with organizers and groups to make things as easy as we can. The range of difficulty in meeting the requirements is certainly variable, and staff are empathetic. We'd also note that the requirements for groups have changed a couple of times, even since we entered into the restart process, which puts a strain on everybody involved in the process. But we're glad to see that the booking numbers are beginning to rebound, and people are finding safe ways to get together in the community. Thanks.
Thank you. On the bottom of page 377, where the booking numbers are, it's quite an astonishing drop for Cooper's Green specifically. Everybody else is, Eric Cardinal's half, Frank West is half, Cooper's Green is down, 90%. Has there been any feedback as to why that might be, or is it just seasonal demand? As fall starts to approach, people are less interested in booking that particular venue?
I'm sorry, Chair. I can't. I'm racking my brains for what occurred in the third quarter there last year that might explain that. It could be a couple of larger events that bumped that up that didn't occur, but I'm not aware of any specific explanation for that difference.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee.
Yes, thank you. Just a little clarification on the showers being open. they're not, are they free? And do they have to be pre-booked?
Staff, go ahead.
Manager Don, if you could answer that, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Jam Hall. Yes, so the washroom and showers aren't open for drop-in use, essentially. It needs to be part of the booking for a lane swim. But we are able to accommodate the odd drop-in washroom user, and then theoretically, somebody could book a, say, swim lane and then just use the showers. So it does need to be booked just with our COVID protocol and flow through the facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. Page 375, under Area D, Roberts Creek. We have completed the test well exploration for the non-potable water source at Cliff Gilker Park. And it's nice to see that sufficient water and flow to support the irrigation system was discovered. Important information. I'm going to do one more before we go to Director Lee. On page 376, under all areas, it says developing a project brief for the Mason Road Park Space Improvements Project. So I know this was something that we looked at before COVID hit. We indicated, it was indicated that the space that they have on Mason Road is way too small, does not work for the needs they have anymore. So it's nice to see this moving forward. And now with the protocols that are in place, it's probably in one way a good thing that it's been slowed down, because what we're going to need is going to be different than what we needed before. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out in the plans that come forward. And I will leave it for now.
And actually, just to tag on to your first comment there about Cliff Gilker Park, the budget that was allotted was just for a test well, correct? That there will have to be a further request coming forward to actually connect into that well?
Yes, Chair. And staff have just received the final report from the hydrologist involved, and will be analyzing it and looking to bring forward information at or prior to the budget process.
Great, thank you. Director Lee.
So on my last question, the showers have to be pre-booked and they are not free. There's some charge to use showers, is that correct? And what is the charge, just out of curiosity?
Manager Don.
Thank you, Chair. So it would be just a normal drop-in charge, so that it does cost money. They aren't free. If a washroom user does drop in, we can accommodate them for free. But showers with our change room capacities, yeah, unfortunately it does need to be booked. It's not free.
$7?
Depending on the rate, whether it's a child, adult, senior, there's various rates. So it's in between about 5 to 7-ish, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I have one more question.
Go ahead.
If I may. On page 368, I noticed the email inquiries are huge. For instance, in August and September, we're looking at 168. That works out to like 5 a day or over 5 a day. Is that an abnormality, or is that the new normal, or what the heck's going on? That's a lot of work.
GM Hull.
Well, staff wish we could answer whether this is the new normal or just a bump. It's certainly a very, very busy time for both building and planning. I would say unprecedented in the time that I've been with the organization, and staff are actively working on improving some of our self-service tools in the hopes that we can either reduce the number of inquiries that staff have to handle, or at least make the experience of responding more efficient for everybody that's involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if this got covered off while I was bumped off, but Is there any way we can find out why people aren't using the recreation facilities? I know it's notoriously difficult to prove a negative. You can't question the people who aren't there because they're not there. But it would be interesting if we had any way to get a sense of what's driving our usership or non-usership.
Go ahead.
Just by way of comment on the director's question, we're still in the restart process, layering in programming and services, and that includes getting our monthly pass program back online. And so even in the few weeks of September, as we were beginning to layer in these things, we're seeing demand increase and uptake come back. And anecdotally, staff are hearing very positive things from those who attend about feeling safe, feeling like everything is planned and controlled. So as we continue to add value for people in terms of offering what they're looking for, and as word gets out through our communication efforts, we're optimistic that we will rebuild our attendance to the highest safe potential that it can be. Thanks.
I think there's something in that last couple sentences too that a lot of it probably boils down to communications. I'm thinking there are probably a lot of people that don't know that the rec facilities are open even. Communications is notoriously slow on the Sunshine Coast, whether it's by social media or whether it's by news papers or what have you. And so I think that's somewhere that perhaps we as directors can help the process by, making sure it's included in our newsletters and our Facebook posts and other agencies that we report at, sharing that information to try and help get the word out there that indeed the facilities are reopening. Director Seegers.
I have to grin because there's times when inaccurate information spreads like wildfire, and then we're putting out those fires. Page 376, under Parks Planning, third bullet, it talks about coordinating with BC Invasive Species Council to look at effective removal and control of invasive species. One of the issues that we've had in the past is with regards to disposal. So how are we dealing with that piece? Because it's great to identify them, remove them, but then where do they go? So have we got a means to deal with that piece?
GM Hall?
Thank you for the question. And no, the disposal piece has not been solved. It remains the highest leverage point on the strategies that emerged from the consultant's review of a regional strategy, and I know it has been referred to our solid waste management team. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing nobody else, page 377, beginning non-potable water source exploration project at Marianne West Park. So I just wanted to mention that it's nice to see you moving it, you're continuing to explore other options. Page 379, and this is follow-up to Director Lee's question. In under all facilities COVID-19, third bullet, it talks about providing washroom and shower services to 6,569 individuals from April 10th to September 7th. So my question then is, given we now have to charge for these services, where are the people who needed these services before going, or do they even have someplace to go to access the showers, for example, that they were accessing here? I mean, I'm assuming the homeless people and whatever are still here. Where are they going? And do we know?
Who'd like to take that on? GM Hall?
Well, thank you for the question. With regard to Pender Harbor, the the CAO or the area director may have more to add to this, but I understand that BC Housing, in coordination with local agencies in the Pender Harbour area, has a washroom solution underway, and that the shower still exists at the government wharf. I'm not sure what the Harbour Authority status of that is. And with regards to our recreation facilities, they do remain available for use for the community. And prior to the pandemic, members of the homeless community would stop into our recreation centers to access services from time to time, and we certainly hope that they continue to do so, and we can support them with the services that we provide. Thank you.
How would we do that, though, given that we now have to book those, and in order to book them, there's a fee? Or do we waive that for them? How do we get that information out? How do we deal with that? You know, and what kinds of issues are our frontline staff now dealing with, given that, you know, it's got this wrinkle added to it?
Thank you. Those are excellent questions, and it's something that staff can look at further. I will say that we do our best to coordinate with social service agencies, and so if there is a member of the community that needs services and they're linked with one of those agencies, we do communicate with them, and we can either coordinate services through that agency, or perhaps we can receive feedback about ways to improve our services. Thanks.
Okay, I'll reach out. I mean, I'm tied into the Homelessness Advisory Committee and all those other. I'll reach out and see if there's something, a gap maybe that has shown up at this point. And if you check with staff, I'm sure they'll be able to give us some feedback as well. Thank you.
Director McMahon.
Yeah, the way that we are delivering recreation services has changed. I assume it is somewhat more staff intensive because we require more cleaning and so forth. It would be interesting at some time in the future to see an analysis of the ratio of staff hours per user hours that we have at the recreation facilities and how that's changed. To get some idea of how much our overhead costs have increased for delivering the same services.
Thank you. Director Lee.
First of all, thank you, Darnelda, for following up on that shower. If you could include Pender Harbour in your inquiries, it would really be appreciated. I hadn't thought of going the social services agency route to make sure the homeless do have affordable access. That was a great idea to look at. I can fill you in on the Pender Harbour situation, seeing that the usage is extremely high there, and it does continue to be high. The Harbour Authority, when the SCRD no longer assumed responsibility for any vandalism that might occur at the facilities because we no longer had our staff that could be there while they were open. Those washrooms were closed and they haven't been opened. They used to be around $2 for a shower because it's just you plug money into a meter, and the chamber was picking up showers for free. So now we are faced with a situation where you have to book a shower at the pool, and it costs $5 to $7, which I'm not sure that just how that works for homeless people. The chamber did open their washrooms in Madeira, so there's hand basins and washrooms available now from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. Because of the cost is over doubled to clean them in this pandemic. The chamber will not be able to afford to keep them open for very long. But the EOC is talking with the provincial government, Ministry of Housing, I believe it is. I could be corrected. And hopefully the subsidy can continue in between the two of them we can keep it open as long as necessary, those 2 washrooms. So that's where we are with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Lee. Anybody have any other questions about the quarterly update? Seeing none, thank you to staff for putting that together. I'd like us to look at Annex L and M at the same time. If there's anything out of either of those 2 items that anybody wants to bring attention to or flag. Seeing no hands up. Oh, Director Lee, my apologies.
Sorry, Chair, I was busy running down through my notes. On page, let me just find the page here. I got to go down. 386. There was the APC has been asking questions that haven't been getting answered, and I was wondering if other APCs were having that issue. I don't know how we actually solve it, but they do ask questions, and by and large are the same questions we asked, like when is a variance, what's a setback, and all that kind of stuff. Is there some way of putting all these in one big pot and trying to answer them all, or do we just not answer the questions as a matter of routine? I'm kind of curious about that.
So specifically around questions that are coming forward from APC that may not be an action item specifically, just informational or
Yes, it's things they don't know that makes them feel uncomfortable about doing their job. It's those kind of things.
Okay. I see that Dave Patey's unmuted himself.
Yes, thank you for the chair. We're in a difficult position to answer questions given that we don't generally staff APC meetings. However, we have reached out to the Area A chair to organize a meeting to discuss some of the items that that appeared not only just in the recent minutes, but to address some of the questions that they have. In addition, we do intend within this year to move forward with APC orientation, and are kind of at the moment strategizing about how we go about that in the most effective way possible given the number of APCs that we have. So we do intend to reach out to our APCs to start answering some of those questions and provide more of a staff resource.
Thank you. Director Lee, are you good, or did you have a follow-up to that?
I think that answered my question, because I was having difficulty in my mind deciding whether we needed to put a staff resource onto the APC meetings or not, which seemed kind of expensive, but somehow we need to answer their questions as well. So just wondering what the going forward process would be.
Okay. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Director Lee. I'm looking forward to a future discussion about APCs and the role and when items are referred to them. But I know there was an instance earlier this year with questions they had about private roads because there was a subdivision application that involved a private road, and they needed more information in order to discuss it adequately. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no hands up on those 2 items. We do have 4 items of communications, Annex N, O, P, and Q. Anything from there that anybody would like to speak to? Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. It sort of came up earlier in the quarterly report is the letter from Mayor Beamish with respect to the Gibsons pool. I've had sort of some correspondence with staff going back to the 4th of September, excuse me, requesting information on potential costs in reopening the Gibsons pool. I was given some information. I had a further email follow-up asking for, were it to open, what would the capacity on, and one thing and another be? The town of Gibsons did offer to engage in helping with some of the capital costs with regard to protective screening and things like that. I haven't had any follow-up to my request for information dated September 11th as to the costs of barriers and one thing and another. I'm just sort of wondering, you know, are we going to get any of the information that was requested? The letters keep coming in. Some of the information has been clarified with regard to, you know, change rooms being open, showers being available. They have to book. I was looking on the Seashell Pool site. There doesn't seem to be any clear information that if you want a shower and that it has to be booked if you're coming in for a swim. So there's a number of issues here, and I'm just hoping for some further clarification on follow-up to the information requested with respect to opening the Gibsons pool.
Okay. Would somebody like to jam Hall?
Well, thank you, Chair. And I guess first, staff apologize if there's an outstanding communication loop. We always endeavor to serve our elected officials with information. Staff's current direction provided by the board is to proceed on the restart path that we're on now, monitor demand, and then report back on. I believe that the wording of the directive is to report back in the fourth quarter on how things are going and the possibilities related to the Gibsons pool. And so staff are continuing on that path, following the direction that we've been given. If I recall the discussion earlier about costs for protective types of things that are required, I think it was in the range of $10,000. And that's from the staff report or the ensuing discussion at the time that restart was being planned. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kroll, did you have a follow-up? Or?
Well, that information, like, there was reference made to a cost of, I believe it was $61,000 were the pool to reopen. It would be an additional cost between October and the end of the year. One of the other ramifications that has come up is the loss of employment to students. There are a number of students who traditionally have worked as lifeguards at the Gibsons pool, and it's sort of from information I've received via the students, they've just been sort of cut out of the loop. It doesn't seem that it's that easy for them to fill the positions at the Seashell pool. So there are a lot of community implications. A lot of seniors seem to have difficulty with the whole idea of having to drive to Seashell. Personally, navigating the booking site, I personally find it a nightmare. And the lack of communication. So, you know, I will report back to council, and the letters still continue to come in with respect to this issue. So, you know, I would appreciate that, you know, I know we discussed when this letter came up originally that it would be brought to the board today. So I appreciate that it is being addressed, but any sort of continuing information or any working that can be done with the community with respect to the money that the community has offered to put up towards reopening the facility, I'd appreciate that being considered.
Okay, thank you. Director Hiltz.
Chair, I'm on Annex Q is where I'm wanting to speak. So whether you okay to go with that one then?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just to give the board an update on on the correspondence. So the way I'm kind of framing the correspondence is, how does a community ask for a service which has been provided in the past that they've never had to ask for, and now it looks like they're going to have to ask for it? So navigating all these various players, which is the federal government, the provincial government, the Squamish Nation, the SCRD, the Islands Trust, GICA, which is the Gambier Island Community Association. So I've been reaching out to it's called GICA, Gambier Island Community Association, and I believe that they are approached SCRD in terms of doing a delegation in the future. So it's a work in progress, and Chair Pratt and I also attended the Islands Trust Committee to explain kind of the SCRD processes. So I think there's a lot of not knowing what to do. So I think we're figuring out steps and informing people very much at this point. So that's something to look forward to, is GICA coming forward. And I'm not expecting that there's going to be any response from the Minister Trevine, seeing that there's elections. She's not running, so they're not holding their breath. And the anxiety around it is the unknownness about when this has to happen. But it's becoming clear that the New Brighton port is a key, robust, the most robust port facility on Gambier Island, which is more weather resistant than others. But it is still exposed to the northeast winds coming out of McNabb Creek and Rainy River. So there is no perfect port there. They're all exposed to the marine environment. So I just wanted to let you know that things are moving along, and it's going to come back to the board at some point in time, and looking forward to GICA coming before the board as a delegation in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies. I've approached the communications in a bit of a haphazard way here. I do have a speakers list. Given that we're currently on Annex Q, the letter from Gambier Island, is there anybody on my speakers list who'd like to speak to that particular issue? You can just give me a little wave. No? Okay. Then I will return back to my speakers list. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to Annex O, letter from the town of Gibsons. I think I'd like to make a recommendation that under the chair's signature, she work with staff to respond to the town of Gibsons and this letter, and indicating, our current plans, maybe some of the learnings that we're getting from opening the Seashield Aquatic Center, and what some of those implications would be to open the Gibsons pool. Because we know that the size of the Gibsons pool is a consideration, given, it's not big, it's fairly small. So what would that look like? So I think some of those pieces might be advisable to include, and then anything else that staff feel based on the questions that have come forward.
Okay. That's something you were moving forward, or you'd like to move. I see a seconder for that. Director Pratt, would you like to speak to that, since you're the one that would be writing the letter?
That was actually something I wanted to be on the speakers list about, was to recommend that we do this to respond back. So I'm happy to support this.
Okay. On my speakers list, anybody else wanting to speak to this particular motion? Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to my email from September 11th, I'd asked for the cost of installing the control barriers, what the capacity of the facility would be, what concerns there were around the hot tub operation because of vapors incurred with that. Was it possible to operate the facility at a reduced time span to comply with union staffing regulations? And anyway, so I certainly appreciate Director Seegers bringing the motion forward, and we can get these points covered and get some dialogue happening between the board and the town, that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. I see Director Ties and Director McMahon with their hands up. Is that pertaining to the motion currently on the floor? No? Director Ties? No? Okay. I see nobody else wishing to speak to that, so I'm going to call a question on it. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize again that we need better data on recreation. We need data per facility, broken out really clearly so that we understand what is the cost to have facilities open and staffed and what is the cost to have them closed and why. I realize that, you know, here comes the word unprecedented again. This whole situation with having to stop and start up recreation facilities, our systems simply weren't built to do this. And so that's, I think, a lot of why we're struggling with it. But it's very difficult to make decisions when we don't fully understand the cost implications of a lot of this. Really, really struggling with it. And it's going to be a big problem for the budget process as well. We need to have a better way of understanding how we make these decisions. We tend to make them based on, okay, we just want to have this facility open. Sometimes it would be nice to say, okay, here's $500,000. What can you do with it? You know, from a different point of view. So I look forward to a robust discussion in future.
Thank you. Director Ties, are you looking to speak to the Annex O item?
No, Annex N. I believe we've kind of wrapped that one up, haven't we?
I just want to check with Director Pratt, because she did raise her hand during this. Annex O or another item?
Another item.
Okay, go ahead, Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. I was a bit surprised about the brevity of the discussion we had around the delegation last time from the ICE users, and I did meet with Stu Frizzell afterwards, and I feel like there's some relevant information missing for me to say that I can be confident that we've made the right decision at this point. So some of the questions I have is one is how busy is the one ice rink that we currently have in operation? Is it pretty close to capacity? Isn't it? Is there space? Is there availability? Or the second question would be how busy is the dry ice use of Sunshine Coast Arena? Then I guess, and the third question is, they made a pretty convincing argument that the financial argument is somewhat moot, considering that they provide 10 times more revenue than the dry ice users do. And the costs are probably not 10 times. So these are all questions that have been ruminating in my head, and I feel like I would like to get a little bit more clarity on all these questions to either reassure us that we've made the right decision, or that in fact there is some opportunity to maybe open the ice. Also, being aware that there's now some scheduled maintenance that may have already started, and makes all this a bit of an exercise in futility. I'd love some comments from staff on that.
Okay. Would anybody like to take a stab at that? Thank you, GM Hall.
Taking the last part first, and then maybe if Manager Don has comments about demand on our two arenas, he could speak to that. But on the last part, yes, staff have proceeded forwards on the board-directed MCC panel work and document Documentation has been finalized, and we're expecting work to start next week.
Okay, so that's happening right now. Okay. Manager Don, did you want to chime in on the occupancy and loading?
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. So yeah, the ice at GAC is booked pretty solid from 3:30 to anywhere from 11 to 11:30 from Monday to Friday, and Saturday, Sundays are pretty much the same from opening to closing, with our public skate kind of in the middle there. So it's really busy, and we also still have our 30 minutes in between our ice slots opposed to the regular 15 because of our increased cleaning and so on and so forth. So yeah, GAC is absolutely busy. As for Sunshine Coast Arena, we opened the dry floor on September 28th. So we're just kind of in our second week here. And we have dry floor rentals occurring as of October 19th onwards, and those are pretty steady bookings as well. Interesting to note that one of the big users that's renting at SCA is minor hockey, supposedly in absence of the ice. But presumably they would book the ice if we remove the dry floor as well. But there is lacrosse and roller girls that have booked it, so it seems to be steady in summary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm actually going to ask a quick follow-up question in there. The 30-minute window between bookings, is that being fully utilized? Is there any effort given to look at trying to shrink the windows? Maybe we can get another group in a working day.
Yeah, we are doing everything we can to look at getting back to 15 minutes where possible. We are still very much streamlining our 30-minute regime. And what that would mean is if we did cut down to 15 minutes is those groups that are booked, say, for an hour would just extend their ice slots. So the time would be used, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Pratt?
Thank you, Chair. So GAC, when you say it's booked from 3 to about 11:30, is that 3 in the afternoon or 3 in the morning?
Sorry, I wasn't very clear on that. Yes, that's 3 p.m. So about 3:30 till 11:30 each day. And then we also do have a morning rental from 6 a.m. to 7 and another one from 9 till 10. And then we have kind of our SCRD programs intertwined throughout the day. Thank you.
Follow-up, Director Pratt?
Just wanted to clarify that that we were using it for early morning ice as well. The other thing is I guess I would just ask the board or the committee if they'd like the chair to write a response or how they would like to respond to the letter, or just receive it at this time and ruminate a little bit more. I don't see. I mean, we've got the work happening at SCA right now, so it's. I mean, it is what it is. Sometimes you make decisions that you can't necessarily easily overturn or overturn at all. So it's. I'm happy with the decision we made. Sometimes you have to make them, and it's not tough, and you cannot please everyone. So it's. It is what it is. We are in that unprecedented time, and as difficult it is, as we've seen in both the letter and the communication from all of our community around the pool, the Gibsons pool, as well as around the secondary ice surface. None of us has a crystal ball. We don't know how all of this is going to go. We may not be able to shrink that 30-minute time in between booking times. COVID protocols could change next week. We don't know this. So, I mean, we're taking it as we can, and appreciate staff's responsiveness. I know it's difficult and it's unfortunate. And then I agree with Director McMahon. When we get the more statistics we can have over recreation use will per facility will certainly help as well. But I've also, Chair Toth, I'm going to leave my hand up because I have questions on other items. So, but that's all I had to say there.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really unfortunate because as an organization, they're trying to return to normal when our facilities simply aren't capable of accepting normal, or at least the pre-COVID time normal. One question I did have, I know other communities have early morning ice. Is 6 a.m. the opening time for GAC?
I can speak to that, Chair. Thanks. So yeah, 6 a.m. is our starting point. We did offer earlier ice slots, and it wasn't very well received. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Pratt.
It's interesting because here I am in my hometown, a hometown that brought forward Kurt Browning and Stuart McLean. So Kurt Browning, famous figure skater, Stuart McLean, Brad Stewart, who went into to the NHL and played in the NHL for a number of years. This is a hockey town, yet ice is only here from end of September to the end of April or beginning of April. That's it every year. So, it's just the irony of it right now. I mean, we're in a really unique time, and it's people. If we've got if staff is making the ice available earlier in the day and it isn't being taken up on, we're offering the opportunity. If organizations are not taking that opportunity, that's their choice. We are offering it. We're doing what we can with the surface we have.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Thank you, staff. Yeah, well, it seems to be that we can move forward with this information. I guess this is good information to take forward into our budget deliberations for 2021, and whether we want both ice rinks open at that point. And I think it's a good discussion to be had right now, but also going forward into our budget deliberations. Thank you, staff, and thank you, everyone, for humoring me on this.
Director McMahon, you've put your hand up. Is that about Annex N?
Sure. Sorry, I'm getting little pop-up messages all over the place. Not your fault. I'm just going to point out that we are in the middle of a global pandemic. And if the biggest problem our community members have is lack of ice time and lack of pool time, then I'm actually okay with that.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director, the speaker's list has disappeared. Okay, so I don't hear anybody wanting to make any motions to do with this. Director McMahon, your hand is still up. Thank you. So moving on from this item, Director Pratt.
Thank you. For Annex P regarding the petition against the TELUS telecommunications facility proposal for Mercer Road, I'm just wondering if staff has an update on the Mercer Road and what we should do with this petition.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So staff understand that that TELUS is reconsidering this project, and we've reached out for some formal documentation on TELUS's proposed next steps. But as of 1 o'clock today, we haven't received anything formal back. So staff are actively monitoring the situation, and are aware of the community concerns as expressed in the petition. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
So TELUS is reconsidering. The letter that the community has put forward says we're not opposed to better cell service on the Sunshine Coast, right? So they want the cell service. They don't want the tower where it is. So is TELUS looking at how to provide the cell service and potentially put the tower in another location, or are they reconsidering actually putting in a cell tower? Because it could be one or the other.
I believe Director Pratt may have more information on this actually, but
as GM Hall said, we don't have anything officially right now. I've been in communications with TELUS, and it's this area is definitely being completely reconsidered. But without having an official communication back from them, I'm loath to say more than that. I know they are still looking at other locations up and down our main artery, number 101. However, as they have indicated in other plans, and I'll leave that there.
okay. Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up. So we do have 2 items of new business. We've got industrial cannabis in ALR, and we've got asset management training opportunity. I'm actually going to turn the chair over to Director Ties. I've got to step away for just a minute or two, and I will be right back, and he can take it from here.
All right. I did not make notes on the agenda items that are still remaining, but let's start with, are we on to new business at this point? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll give Director McMahon the floor on the cannabis issue.
Thank you. Back in May of last year, we attended a presentation by the Ministry of Agriculture about changes in ALR rules around industrial production of cannabis. At that time, I thought that this would only affect parcels of 8 hectares or larger. I'm not sure whether I was mistaken or not, but there has been a recent incident in my area that leads me to wonder if there are not loopholes in the new regulations that are going to allow industrial cannabis on ALR properties smaller than 8 hectares. And, you know, it's also a confusing area because there is the different layers of regulation between the SCRD and the ALR. So I was hoping that I could make a motion asking for a staff report on the status of the production of cannabis, the non-soil based production of cannabis on agricultural land, and what options we have for regulation on that. Anybody want a second?
Oh, so we have that seconded. I was going to go to staff to see if they have any comments on this.
Thank you, Chair. I'll comment just that we have received correspondence regarding concerns about cannabis production in general, but also specifically on agricultural properties, and staff are following up. There are a number of constraints, including ALC regulations and being consistent with those regulations. Staff would be pleased to report back on current regulations and opportunities to improve and provide clarity if directed to do so.
Thank you, staff. I see Director Lee has his hand up.
Yes, I was just wondering about the non-soil based. Is this greenhouse? You're referring to greenhouse production, or are you? Because in greenhouse they grow them in soil. So I'm wondering about the definition.
The definition of soil-based. Director McMahon.
I'll just start on. There are 2 kinds of greenhouses. There are ones with soil, but there are also ones that.
This on to staff as well. It has all of the. My sound just went funny on my end. I'll forward it on to staff, and they can use this as the basis because it has all the links to all the information. I know we in the district of Seashell, we did put in a change to our zoning bylaw at that time to address this because it opened up all of our ALR land for cannabis production, and we didn't want that.
Thank you. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of in follow-up to what Director Seegers was saying, the town of Gibsons also, brought in a zoning bylaw that limited the number of cannabis growing operations that could exist within the town. So I would certainly think, I can see there's a possible concern for all of a sudden, huge quantities of ALR land that are this license, opening another whole can of worms.
Okay, we seem to be having some recurring sound issues. I'm not sure. Sometimes there's an echo, sometimes there isn't. Okay, I guess I see
It's likely the CAO, but it does differ from time to time, so we'll have to confirm it.
Okay, we've got Miss Director Ilse's hands up. Do you want to follow up, or? Oh no, Director Seegers, go ahead.
They wouldn't come and necessarily do a presentation to us. They have a certain number of seats, and it's then if we register, we can actually take part in those sessions at the specified times. I think they also have put out the opportunity to come later, I think, depending on the turnout of these sessions, to potentially do sessions locally. That might be something that we could, up and down the coast, go together and see if we can make that happen.
Okay, do we need a motion for staff to investigate the best way of getting a presentation to us, and then to go follow that course? Any thoughts, staff?
Sorry, Director Ties, are you asking if we need a motion?
Yeah, do we need a motion to get this underway, or can staff just look into doing that without a motion?
We can look into doing it.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other items that are on the agenda at this point? I don't believe so. So I think I can hand it over to the chair for adjournment.
Right on. Thank you, Director Ties. You handled that quite well. Just before we adjourn, oh, sorry, I had seen somebody's hand go up. Seeing nothing else, motion to adjourn? Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Great. Thank you very much. Questions from our gallery? Director Lee, I keep seeing your hand go up. Do you have a question?
No, I wanted to make sure we asked the gallery before we left. Thanks.
For sure. Sophie.
Hi there. The first question I had was just around the Mercer Road Tower petition, whether TELUS gave any reason for stepping back from that.
I believe we've only heard verbally from TELUS, but Director Pratt?
Sophie, at this time, we have nothing official from TELUS saying they have stepped back.
I mean, yeah, there's something we can cobble together. I'm just kind of talking it out loud to figure out what.
And then another question is just, I guess this one would be for Director Hiltz, just with regards to the new Brighton dock. My understanding is that Squamish Nation hasn't made any decision one way or the other on what they're going to do, and one of the possibilities includes keeping the dock. So I'm just trying to understand why the community is even asking at this point the SCRD to look into the potential of taking it over. Like there doesn't seem to be from this end any clear indication one way or the other.
You know, anything else, if it doesn't work out, at least we've got that. And some of that business will help campaigns will work. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, that's
Yes, I'm getting some feedback, some radio signals.
Oh, sorry.
This is it.
That's Sean in the background.
Is it all audio, or is it like wiry weird?
No, it's talking. We're definitely
It's talking. You're hearing the talk. Nice.
Smack him with something. I don't know.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thanks.
So in responding, as far as I know, the Squamish Nation is considering their options. And so I think in terms of how